Adrian thought he was untouchable until Cale found the files. On the surface, Adrian Mercer's a perfect man, rich, charming, ethical, beloved by investors, and married to a senatoress daughter. But Cale Duvall's people dug deeper and found surveillance accounts, hidden investigators, offshore instruments, and 7 women he had quietly destroyed. Adrian thought he was hunting Sarafina. He didn't realize the Mafia boss had started hunting him. This exact frame for a moment. It is 11:47 p.m., and we are standing in the freezing, immaculate kitchen of Manhattan's most dangerous crime lord. Observe the young woman at the sink. Her thin frame practically vibrates with suppressed panic, completely oblivious that the architect of her fate has just stepped from the shadows. Here is the tragic irony of this scene. The man entering the room is a textbook sociopath with ice in his veins. Yet, in a beautifully twisted turn of fate, this absolute monster is about to become her only shield against total annihilation. Sometimes the only thing that can save you from the wolves is a tiger. Stay with me, because we are going to watch 2 shattered people turn a high-rise into an emotional war zone. Focus your attention on Sarafina. The air in this sterile room reeks of heavy citrus cleaner, but beneath that sharp chemical bite, you can practically smell her sheer terror. Her raw, red hands violently scrub a stain that vanished 20 minutes ago. Why does she continue? Because the absolute second her hands stop moving, the dark memories flood back in, bringing a suffocating wave of panic. The entire penthouse is dead silent, save for the rhythmic rushing of tap water. She has been conditioned by pure psychological hell to remain invisible, terrified that a single sound will bring her pain. It is a harsh reality of human nature. When your nervous system gets permanently locked in survival mode, every quiet, peaceful room feels like a loaded weapon aimed right at your chest. The rest of Kyle Duvall's staff left 2 hours ago, yet Sarafina remains. She forces herself through these punishing shifts simply to avoid the subway during normal hours, shrinking the odds of her former abuser finding her. She refuses to even let his name cross her mind. Look around this high-rise kitchen. The brutal architecture tells you everything about the man who rules it, floor-to-ceiling glass, allowing him to stare down at the city like an untouched god. Freezing Italian marble, devoid of a single warm edge, it is the flawless aesthetic for a man who built a massive empire out of terrifying absolute control. And yet, she feels infinitely safer in this sterile icebox than she ever did in her own home. True safety, after all, is often just a matter of perspective. For 6 agonizing months, she has been hiding perfectly within this dark shadow. She only ever sees Duvall during the dead, silent hours of the night when he returns from his terrifying world. At 34, his criminal armor is so thick that merely whispering his name on the street could get a person buried. But here is the monumental catch. In all this time, Duvall has never shown a single flicker of aggression toward her. She intentionally walked straight into the den of an apex predator, simply to hide from a lesser, more erratic threat. Think about the quiet heartbreak of that logic. The bitterest reality of trauma is that a victim will gladly step right into the jaws of a lion, as long as it guarantees that desperate street dogs will finally stop chasing them. You and I are observing a deeply fractured mind attempt to balance an impossible equation. She truly convinced herself that standing beside a monster rendered her invisible. Watch her under that scalding tap water. For one fleeting second, her tired eyes glaze over, dreaming of an end to this endless running. Then, the silence breaks, a soft click, the heavy latch of a door closing. Instantly, her body completely betrays her. Her muscles lock into rigid stone and she stops breathing. In her tragic past, the subtle sound of a door shutting meant the worst kind of agony was about to begin. Her body braces for impact before her mind can even register the room. It is a cruel, sobering truth that our bodies remember the trauma our minds desperately try to forget. Notice how perfectly still she becomes. Her frantic brain calculates the terrible math of trauma, measuring the exact distance to the exit while knowing a sudden sprint only invites a predator to strike. But then, a voice slices through the freezing air. It is steady, calm, and entirely void of rage. He simply asks, "Who did this to you?" Her racing heart stutters. It is only Duval. Watch her deep survival training activate. She turns around in agonizingly slow motion, keeping both wet hands hovering over the marble where he can track them. She is petrified that a sudden twitch will seal her fate. She tries desperately to manage his temper, missing the chilling irony that a true psychopath does not lose his temper. When they are pushed, they simply end things. Duval holds his position in the doorway, commanding the space with the dead, terrifying stillness of a great white shark. That flawlessly tailored suit is far more than mere fabric. It is a calculated weapon of absolute authority. Look closely at his dark eyes. He is not even blinking. He holds a heavy glass, yet takes no sip, preferring to dissect every microscopic flinch on her pale face. Sarafina immediately shrinks into herself, dropping her gaze to the floor like a wounded animal. She stammers a frantic apology, desperately offering to finish the cleaning tomorrow. Duval completely ignores her panic. He drops one flat, heavy command: answer the questions. He does not raise his voice. A man with that level of power simply expects the universe to bend to his will. For years, this battered young woman has deployed weak excuses and fragile apologies to survive the wrath of angry men. But against Duval's clinical, terrifying stare, those fragile survival tricks instantly turn to ash. You cannot lie to a man who is so deeply rooted in his own dark reality. She tries regardless, whispering to the floor that she does not understand his meaning. Duval slowly lowers his glass to the cold marble. It barely makes a sound, yet her entire body violently jerks in sheer terror. In that single motion, a profound wave of shame washes over her. She despises her inability to hide her fear. Duval captures every tragic detail in his mind. He steps toward her with agonizing slowness, intentionally pacing himself. He is stalking her, but gently. I want you to study this next subtle movement because his psychological manipulation here is a dark form of art. Instead of towering over her trembling frame to command fear, he does the exact opposite. He pulls out a heavy chair and sits down, aligning his cold eyes perfectly with hers. By entirely erasing that vertical power dynamic, he beautifully short-circuits her panicked nervous system. She is left utterly paralyzed. His face remains a blank, unreadable wall as he begins listing the grim evidence: the dark bruising on her wrist, her physical revulsion to a closing door, the midnight scrubbing of a spotless counter out of pure terror. He dismantles her carefully constructed fake reality with the cold unfeeling and absolute precision of a seasoned sniper. She frantically buries her shaking hands out of sight, clinging desperately to the illusion that she is holding herself together. She whispers that she is perfectly fine. He instantly crushes the lie. He repeats his quiet demand: "Who did this to you?" That relentless repetition strikes her fragile psyche like a heavy hammer. The massive fortress of lies she built to survive these past 6 months is turning to dust. The brutal reality is that Duval feels zero empathy for her pain. This is a terrifying display of pure dominance. He already knows exactly who hurt her. He simply demands to hear her confess it. As hot tears spill down her cheeks, she fights a losing battle. The hardest lesson we ever learn is that sometimes pure vulnerability is far more terrifying than physical pain. Observe how masterfully he weaponizes the heavy silence. He offers no comforting glance, no hollow apology to ease her suffering. He simply sits in the suffocating quiet, allowing the internal pressure to build until her mind finally shatters. For a woman deeply accustomed to loud, physical violence, this quiet waiting game is exquisite torture. Finally, she breaks. She barely whispers the name Adrian Mercer, confessing they were together for 2 painful years. Watch Duval's eyes right here. A dark, violent shadow crosses his face. It is the chilling look of an apex predator realizing another wolf has been hunting in his sacred territory. Past tense, he notes, cold as the marble floor. She nods softly. In that exact second, her ultimate fate slips completely out of her hands. We are going to unpack this heartbreaking moment together. Duval states that her ex is still hunting her, delivering the terrifying fact not as a question, but as a chilling promise. This ex is a master manipulator hiding his rot behind a charming smile. Yet, listen to her tragic defense. She claims he never used his fists, believing that somehow invalidated her victimhood. It is a textbook, gut-wrenching case of Stockholm Syndrome. In response, Duval's stoic armor finally shows a microscopic crack. His rigid jaw tightens just a fraction of an inch before he delivers the killing psychological blow. He leans in as it asks, "How long did it take you to finally believe that lie?" The hollow, shattered laugh that falls from her lips is enough to completely break your heart. You and I should pause the frame right here. The room goes dead quiet, leaving only the low hum of the refrigerator to match the suffocating tension. Duval stands up like a machine, no wasted movement, just pure dominance, and downs his drink to reset the board. He looks down and states that she is safe here. He is not comforting her. He is planting a flag and claiming territory. Sarafina is so fractured she cannot process it. She is haunted by her ex, whispering that Adrian never makes a mistake. And Duval? He drops the most arrogant, ice-cold line imaginable. "Neither do I." He says it without a single blink. The tragic irony of life is that sometimes, to survive the wolf hunting you in the dark, you have to willingly lock yourself in a cage with a lion. I have watched this exact tragic dynamic unfold 100 times before on screen. Kyle steps closer, but notice how the camera captures him stopping just short of her panic zone. He is treating her like a startled, trembling deer. He stares with those dead, pale eyes and tells her she works for him now. Nobody touches what belongs to his house. He is not playing the hero. He is merely cataloging a brand new piece of property. But here is the truly heartbreaking part. Sarafina actually feels a flicker of hope. This is the precise second that a dark attachment takes root. She asks what happens if Adrian finds her, and Kyle just gives this perfectly lethal, terrifying smile. When you are chased by the devil, you never ask the demon who saves you for his moral credentials. Kyle casually mentions that her ex will regret ever breathing in her direction. The director then pulls us into a quiet 3-day montage. Sarafina scrubs rooms that are already spotless, while the staff moves like silent ghosts. But pay attention to the shadows. The entire environment is shifting. Security codes change in the dead of night. The doorman suddenly checks identification like a border guard. Cameras slowly tilt to wipe out every single blind spot. Nobody says a word to her, but when you have lived your whole life in fear, you feel the cage shrinking around you. Real power never screams its name in your face. It just quietly, methodically locks all the exits. On the fourth night, she hears low voices leaking from his private study. The heavy oak door is cracked just an inch, casting a thin slice of light across her face. She hears Kyle speaking, his tone dripping with absolute authority, while a nervous subordinate gives a report on Adrian. The man is 37, an Ivy League graduate, worth $200 million, and does not even have a parking ticket. Kyle shuts that down instantly, ordering the man to keep digging. When the subordinate questions what they are even looking for, Kyle delivers a bone-chilling reply. They are looking for everything Adrian buried. Let us look at this together, because perfection is always the ultimate red flag. If a man presents a flawless surface with absolutely zero mistakes, he is almost certainly hiding a graveyard of skeletons in his closet. Sarafina stands totally frozen in the dim hallway. Every primal instinct screams at her to run away, but the heavy weight of trauma simply glues her shoes to the floorboards. The investigator warns that digging that deep will take weeks. Kyle slices right through the excuse, giving him exactly 72 hours to get it done. As heavy footsteps head for the door, her brain finally snaps into gear. She grabs some folded towels and hurries away, her chest heaving with panic. Think about the twisted tragedy of her situation. She feels profound relief that someone is finally hunting Adrian, yet absolute terror knowing what Kyle is truly capable of. Here is a harsh truth for us all. Knowledge is a loaded gun, but it is utterly useless if you are too terrified to pull the trigger. She stares at the book before retreating to her cold, sterile bedroom. The camera lingers on her, reading until 4 a.m. and realizes brutally sad. Every page acts as a mirror, showing exactly how she was dismantled piece by piece. The isolation, the stalking, the calculated mind games, designed to make her feel insane. Adrian wrapped his deep psychological sickness in a pretty bow and called it romance. When she finally passes out, she dreams of endless, dark hallways and his voice swearing she will never escape. No matter how fast you run, your demons always catch a ride in your own head. 2 weeks later, her phone suddenly buzzes. Unknown caller. Then a text drops. I know where you are. Her entire fragile fantasy of safety shatters instantly. Watch her pale face in this lingering close-up shot. Her entire reality simply breaks. The edges of the room bleed into darkness. Her trembling hands go entirely numb, and the phone clatters against the hard tiles. 6 brutal months of hiding, of playing dead, of building this delicate little bubble of safety, completely wiped out by 5 simple words. A normal survivor would just pack a bag, change her name again, and vanish into the cold wind. But look deep into her eyes. She is fundamentally exhausted. She is sick of running from the toxic shadow that keeps destroying her life. This right here is the true turning point of the tragedy. Sometimes, having your back slammed violently against a brick wall is the only thing that finally teaches you how to throw a punch. The guard working the desk is Marcus, a hardened former military man who can spot raw fear from a mile away. He takes one look at her ghost white face and knows immediately that the walls have fallen. She asks for Duval, and miraculously, her voice does not even shake. Marcus sees the sheer, desperate panic in her eyes, throws the strict protocol out the window, and radios his boss. Kyle does not miss a single beat. Send her up. Now consider the stark lighting of Kyle's office for a second. It consumes the whole corner of the penthouse, radiating pure, suffocating intimidation. Massive glass windows, absolutely zero clutter, and a dark wooden desk resembling an altar. Your living space always reveals the truth of your soul, and this room demands absolute, unbroken control. She steps into the cavernous room, where Kyle is staring out the glass, barking ruthless orders into his phone like a dictator. He commands someone to ignore the board and just get the deal done tonight. He hangs up and slowly turns around. The precise second he sees the ruin in her face, the entire atmosphere of the room shifts. He does not offer warm comfort. He demands to know what happened, analyzing her like a detective pulling facts from a bleeding witness. Sarafina trembles as she hands him the phone. Kyle reads the glowing screen, and his posture turns to literal stone. The scariest thing a dangerous man can do is absolutely nothing. His silence is that heavy, dead quiet you feel right before a tornado rips the roof off your house. Total destruction is imminent. When he finally breaks the silence, his voice is unnervingly soft. He treats her with the delicate precision of handling an active bomb. He extracts the cold facts. The text arrived 5 minutes ago, and she did not reply. He sets the device down like a piece of criminal evidence and softly instructs her to sit. Then he does something beautifully unexpected. Instead of hiding behind his massive desk, he grabs a glass of water and sits directly in front of her. He looks right into her tear-filled eyes and says she did the right thing. She tries to blame herself, but he cuts her off. You did the right thing. Real healing begins the exact second another human being finally takes your side. She buries her face in her trembling hands, fighting a losing battle against her own tears. She chokes out a desperate apology for bringing chaos to his door. Kyle simply stares right through her and states that she is not a liability. He declares that she is part of his house now, and he protects his property. Any normal person would hear that dark claim of ownership and run for the hills. It is the exact same toxic language her abuser once used. But her damaged psyche is unknowingly trading one fierce master for another. Kyle's twisted possessiveness sneaks past her defenses because he wields it as a shield to keep her alive, not a chain to bind her. She looks up and asks what they do now. Kyle rises, stepping effortlessly back into his ruthless kingpin persona. The absolute best way to kill paralyzing fear is to finally take action. The quiet war has just begun. For a fleeting second, the camera catches a genuine spark of human empathy beneath his freezing exterior. He explains that Adrian threatened her on his personal turf, so now it is his problem. She points out that he does not owe her a single thing, and he simply replies, I know. You can feel the heavy, tragic weight of those two softly spoken words. A rational man would fire her, wipe his hands clean, and protect his perfect empire. But here is something you and I must remember. The most fiercely dangerous loyalty in this world is the kind freely chosen, not violently forced. He dials his underworld fixer, his voice shifting back into pure predator mode. He orders a total background sweep. He is about to strip Adrian's digital life to the absolute bone and utterly ruin him. We need to pause the film right here, because this is the exact frame where the thriller dies and the true Greek tragedy begins. Kyle tells his man that he does not care about the financial cost. He wants it done in 48 hours. He hangs up and dictates strict lockdown rules like a prison warden. But right as Sarafina reaches the doorway, she turns and asks the ultimate question. Why are you doing this? His statuesque face remains stone, but his eyes finally crack. A tiny, ancient fracture of sorrow, he answers softly. Because nobody did it for me. That is the brutal, unspoken truth of growing up entirely broken. We spend our entire adult lives desperately trying to build enough power to go back and rescue the helpless, terrified kid we used to be. Midnight is the hour when a traumatized mind clocks in for its most agonizing shift. Sarafina lies perfectly rigid, her wide eyes staring into the dark. Her mind endlessly scrolls through tragic endings, terrified that Adrian is coming to rip her fragile new life to shreds. Defeated by 213, she wanders into the freezing, cavernous penthouse, bathed only in the artificial glow of city lights. But as she reaches the kitchen, she freezes in the shadows. Kale is already there. There are no expensive suits or impenetrable armor. He is just a man in gray sweatpants and a dark shirt. It is deeply unsettling to watch an apex predator simply existing in the quiet of the night. The harsh truth we must all learn is this: the most dangerous figures in our lives rarely look like monsters when they are resting. Step into this scene with me and observe the framing. Kale sits bathed in the harsh glare of his laptop, his hair disheveled, looking as though he has not slept a full night in decades. He is a man obsessed. But watch closely what he does not do. He never demands to know why she haunts the halls like a ghost. He simply shuts his screen and nods toward the empty stool. Without uttering a single syllable, he prepares her coffee. Cream, exactly 1 sugar. He has been paying attention. He asks if sleep evades her, and she gives a slow, heavy nod. They sit together in the suffocating dark, watching the sprawling city breathe far below. Two completely shattered souls finding brief comfort in their shared inability to dream. The lesson here is profound. Sometimes the absolute greatest gift you can offer a broken heart is simply sharing the silence. The camera lingers on Serafina as she finally asks the question hanging in the cold air. Why does a powerful man isolate himself in this massive steel fortress? For a fleeting second, the impenetrable wall behind Kale's eyes cracks. He speaks of a youth trapped in suffocating spaces where people weaponized closeness to inflict deep wounds. He vowed to use future power to purchase sheer distance. She understands completely. Having just escaped a monster, she knows the exact weight of those invisible scars. When she asks how old he was when he fled, his voice drops to a whisper. 17. Where did he go? Anywhere else, he replies into the shadows. That is the true, bleeding tragedy of survival. When you are desperately running from the very people who were supposed to love you, the destination does not matter. The only direction that means anything is away. Notice the slight shift in her posture. She understands that desperate need for reinvention. You must burn your old self to ash just to stay alive. She asks if he ever returns to that past, and he shoots the thought down instantly. When pressed if he misses it, those glacial eyes reveal a microscopic fracture. You do not miss a prison, he tells her with hollow finality. You simply digest the reality that you survived it. It is a beautifully fragile moment of trust until the real world shatters the illusion. Kale drops a devastating revelation about Adrian. Her psychopathic ex is weaponizing his network to track everyone who ever dared to leave him. Absolute dread sinks deep into Serafina's trembling bones. It is a harsh, terrifying reminder for us all. The ghosts of our past do not merely haunt the shadows, they actively hunt us down. Her voice trembles as she forces herself to ask how many others there are. Kale does not soften the blow. At least 7. This is the sickening truth about a narcissist like Adrian. He never throws a physical punch. Instead, he orchestrates a suffocating ballet of control, gaslighting victims until their own minds become foreign territory. Serafina shuts her eyes, feeling the phantom weight of that invisible cage. When she asks Kale for his next move, the warmth drains from the room. He is going to end it. Panic grips her. She warns that Adrian is merely testing the perimeter. But Kale does not flinch. He is preparing a lethal strike. She grips the stone counter to steady her violently shaking hands. The chilling reality is clear. True monsters never hide in the dark. They operate in broad daylight behind charming smiles. She desperately warns him that Adrian commands legal empires designed solely to bury his enemies. Cale leans into the faint light, his jaw set with a terrifying, unyielding confidence. He softly tells her that he wields the exact same destructive power. Half of her soul is paralyzed by terror, yet the other half finally tastes salvation. Her ingrained trauma screams at her to push Cale away, to shield this solitary man from the toxic blast radius of her past. But she remains silent. The cinematic irony is thick. For the first time, a true apex predator stands firmly between her and the architect of her suffering. Her profound exhaustion finally overpowers her endless fear. When she asks for her role, Cale commands her to simply stay safe. We must all learn this difficult lesson. Sometimes, the absolute bravest act of defiance is simply letting someone else hold the shield and fight it. He orders her to entirely let go of the steering wheel of her life. Naturally, her fiercely guarded independence flares up in defense. But Cale lowers his tone, his velvet voice bypassing her thickest emotional armor. He points out that surviving in total isolation has hollowed her out, and it is time to surrender the heavy lifting. The tears break instantly, a physical flood of pure, exhausted panic spilling down her cheeks. She quietly confesses that she no longer knows how to depend on another human soul. He simply whispers to learn. As the pale dawn washes over the city, her chronic terror softens into a fragile trust. But in a tragedy like this, peace always carries a rapid expiration date. Exactly 1 week later, the illusion violently shatters. Marcus breaches the room, his face carved with grim urgency. A brutal lesson for us all. The moments we finally feel safe are often just the quiet before the devastating storm. Listen to the sudden shift in tempo. Marcus announces that Cale needs her in the security vault immediately. The camera captures the exact second her stomach plummets. She begs for context, but Marcus offers only silence. Her heart hammers relentlessly against her ribs as they enter a room pulsating with glowing camera feeds. Cale stands rigid, locked onto the central monitor, like a lion spotting blood. He orders her to watch. The digital footage rewinds 40 minutes. A mundane lobby. Then, a man glides into the frame, carrying a massive arrangement of white tea, peonies. Serafina's lungs completely seize. Those blossoms were the exact psychological torture device her ex used to shatter her sanity. The harsh reality is undeniable. The most terrifying weapons on Earth are not forged from steel. Sometimes they are perfectly disguised as a grand romantic gesture. Every time Adrian shattered her reality, he presented those pristine white flowers as a deeply twisted apology. On the grainy screen, this sociopath struts through the lobby, wearing the charming mask society so easily applauds. He is denied entry at the desk, yet that perfect, plastic smile never wavers. He carefully deposits the bouquet and strolls out into the daylight. The nightmare consumes less than 90 seconds. The footage freezes. Cale turns his head. His features are carved from marble, yet his pale eyes radiate lethal intent. He coldly asks if she expected her abuser to breach their sanctuary. She can only offer a trembling shake of her head. The bitter truth about toxic people is a terrifying pill to swallow. They never truly let you go. They merely retreat into the shadows, calculating exactly how long it takes for you to flinch upon their return. Cale sharply asks if Adrian has penetrated their defenses through other channels. She swears he has not. Instantly, Cale shifts into a wartime general, commanding Marcus to hijack street cameras and dissect traffic grids. In the center of this storm, Serafina remains frozen, trapped in a suffocating flashback of her abuser. This is the dark illusion of a high-functioning sociopath. They construct a flawless public facade so the world trusts them, deliberately making their victim appear insane. A violent wave of nausea forces her to grip the console. Kale slices through the silence, stating the terrifying obvious. The man is escalating. She gasps for air, begging to know what happens next. Kale locks eyes with her and confirms the shift. The era of playing defense has ended. The bleak lesson is absolute. You cannot negotiate with a predator. You must simply evolve into the greater threat. Dissects the sickening psychology at play. Adrian is physically appearing simply to prove he still owns her soul. It is the textbook logic of an abuser, weaponizing sheer terror. Her knuckles white as she demands a counterattack. Kale does not blink. He slides a thick dossier across the desk, declaring the cycle dies today. Her hands tremble violently as she opens it. Inside lies the forensic obliteration of Adrian's curated life, hidden accounts, encrypted threats, and the buried testimonies of 4 other women he destroyed. Seeing her exact trauma validated in black ink makes her shake uncontrollably. She asks how Kale unearthed these ghosts. He replies with chilling calm that his operatives exhume exactly what monsters attempt to bury. Let this be our lesson. No matter how deep a villain buries their sins, the truth will always claw its way back into the unforgiving light. Walk through this final sequence with me. Envision the cinematography. Serafina stands before the monitors, realizing she holds the ammunition to completely detonate her abuser's pristine existence. And Kale? His transformation is breathtaking. His face goes entirely dead, shifting from quiet protector to ruthless executioner in a single breath. He casually whispers that he is going to have a conversation. By 9:47, he emerges draped in a flawless, midnight black suit. He is entirely unarmed, yet he walks with the terrifying grace of a billionaire Grim Reaper. He slides into a shadowed sedan that practically purrs as it begins its hunt through the neon-drenched streets. Marcus stands rigid, a silent sentinel guarding the fortress. The profound lesson here is one we often forget. Sometimes the universe sends us the exact monster we need to slaughter our demons. True safety rarely looks soft. Marcus stands like cold granite, refusing to yield a single detail about Kale. The low light feels suffocating, pressing down on Serafina as she grips the mahogany desk. Her knuckles gleam white. Every primal instinct screams at her to run before the blast radius of Duval's violence reaches her, but the tragic reality of her exhaustion anchors her. She has lived in chronic terror for far too long to flee. What if he fails? She whispers. Marcus lets a dark smirk touch his mouth, murmuring that Kale consumes men like Adrian just to pass the time. The lesson here is born of sheer survival. Prolonged terror drains your soul so completely that eventually you must place your fragile trust in the darkest predator willing to stand by your side. Marcus, projecting cold confidence, does nothing to quiet the violent drumming of Serafina's heart. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? She knows intimately how Adrian retaliates when his ego is bruised. He aims for total psychological annihilation. She remains paralyzed before the security monitors, suffocating in dark scenarios. Cut to Kale, approaching a nameless facade of tinted glass. The heavy steel door yields instantly, is silently crowning him the king of this sunless empire. Inside, the air is thick with amber shadows and the scent of expensive cigars. It forces a chilling realization upon the viewer. The most dangerous arenas on Earth rarely resemble chaotic battlegrounds. True evil prefers to hide itself, quietly breathing and waiting in breathtaking luxury. The upstairs chamber is designed purely to crush the spirit. The lens pans across dark walnut paneling and heavy leather armchairs, radiating a silent threat that screams no one will hear you bleed. A shadow in the corner nods, confirming the target sits alone. Cale ignores the heavy silence, gliding up the narrow staircase like a ghost with a violent purpose. Observe the geometry of this trap. 1 table, 2 chairs, 0 exits. Adrian sits there, draped in pristine white, flashing that hollow smile he uses to charm the elite. As Cale enters, Adrian rises, extending a hand in a pathetic display of gentlemanly grace. It is a grotesque masquerade. The quiet truth to remember is that the most venomous souls will always try to blind you with an illusion of politeness right before they strike. Adrian forces a veneer of warmth. Cale lets the outstretched hand wither in the air, lowering himself into the chair with terrifying stillness. A heavy folder lands on the table with a fatal thud. Adrian keeps his plastic smile stitched in place, but his gaze snaps to the dossier. The first tremor of panic ripples across his jaw. He probes how Cale could possibly know Serafina. Cale offers a dead stare, flatly denying any connection. Adrian feigns innocent confusion. Cale leans forward, stating that Adrian crossed a sacred boundary by claiming what is not his. The tragedy of arrogance is universal. Those who treat human lives as disposable objects will eventually summon a ruthless predator who plays their cruel game with lethal precision. You and I have seen this moment before the suffocating instant a predator realizes the cage has locked. The temperature seems to plummet. Adrian lies that he merely delivered innocent flowers to an old friend. Cale refuses the fiction, naming it a calculated strike meant to terrorize a broken woman. Adrian forces a hollow laugh, insisting Serafina requires no protector. Cale leans closer, the dim light catching his lifeless eyes, and orders him to open the file. Adrian hesitates, his knuckles draining of blood as he peels back the cover. This is the bitter poetry of the tormentor. They revel in their false omnipotence until someone forces them to look. The unforgiving truth is that every tyrant inevitably strikes a solid wall of stone that finally shatters their fragile bones. Adrian asks what he is looking at. Beneath his fingertips lies the total ruin of his existence. Ledgers expose a shadowy fund used for obsessive surveillance. Emails prove he weaponized investigators to stalk 7 women. Sworn testimonies detail his methodical psychological torture. Adrian closes the flap, masking his dread with bored disdain, yet murder burns behind his pupils. He dismisses it as forgery, sneering that anyone can bribe a witness. Cale reclines into the shadows, deeply relaxed, agreeing that forgery is possible but unnecessary here. Adrian clenches his jaw so violently it might crack. It is a terrifying awakening. The darkest deeds always leave a permanent mark, and all the wealth in the world can never completely erase the paper trail of your past. You and I are going to unpack this shift in power together. Adrian demands to know what Cale wants. Cale drops his tone into a chilling register, commanding that Serafina is entirely off limits. No digital traces, no flowers, no watches. Adrian must erase her from his memory. Adrian scoffs, a desperate flex of his ego, asking what happens if he refuses. Cale offers no reaction. The ensuing silence is dense enough to shatter glass. Adrian barks a hollow laugh, threatening to obliterate Cale's enterprise with bogus violations. Cale casually invites him to dial the number. Adrian sneers, promising absolute ruin. The stark lesson echoes in the room. Weak men always target your wealth, entirely incapable of understanding a soul that values brutal loyalty far beyond mere paper currency. Cale leans closer, his voice softening to a velvet whisper. It is the signature of an apex predator. They quiet down right before the killing stroke. He murmurs that despite Adrian's fortunes, he made one catastrophic error. Adrian demands to know what that is. Cale dissects him with clinical precision. He explains that Adrian tragically confuses genuine power with hoarding secrets. Blackmail only destroys a man who cares about his public reflection. Adrian's false armor splinters. Cale confesses, eyes devoid of warmth, that he cares nothing for public scandal or politics. He cares only for his brutal code. It is a chilling reminder. Never provoke a war with a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. He will gladly burn your entire kingdom to ash just to feel the warmth of the fire. Cale delivers his ultimatum. Adrian will never hold your breath near Serafina again. Adrian's control snaps. He shouts, claiming ownership over her. Cale vivisects him with 3 words. She does not. Adrian loses his grip, ranting wildly about their past, insisting he was her savior. The horror is that Adrian believes his twisted fairy tale. Cale cuts through the delusion, laying bare the suffocating isolation that masqueraded as affection. That is not romance, he whispers. It is a hostage situation. Adrian launches to his feet, declaring the conversation terminated. Cale remains carved from stone. The tragic flaw of every abuser is profound. They mistake brutal possession for true love, and they shatter into violent pieces when the harsh light of reality finally exposes them. Cale softly commands him to sit down. Adrian spits an arrogant, "Excuse me." Cale repeats it. The words are so laced with quiet danger that Adrian's survival instinct takes over. He sinks back into the leather. Cale slides a second dossier across the table. Adrian opens it, and the lens captures the exact second his confidence dies. The pages are heavy with catastrophic financial rot and offshore accounts Adrian swore were buried forever. He looks hollowed out, whispering a plea for the source. Cale merely replies that he knows people. Adrian stammers that Cale cannot do this. Cale's eyes go dead as he whispers, "I already did." The tragic lesson is pure poetry. Those who walk the earth, convinced they are untouchable, will always leave the most devastating evidence scattered in their wake. Cale does not blink. He states that a tip has already reached the authorities, and Adrian's board will have the file in 3 days. Adrian's hand develops a violent tremor. The untouchable king is descending into a panic attack. He scrambles for dominance, accusing Cale of a bluff. Cale lets the silence stretch and softly invites him to call it. Adrian spirals from denial to suffocating terror. Realizing he is trapped with an apex predator, he weakly asks what Cale wants. Cale reiterates his single boundary: stay away from Serafina. Adrian cannot process losing his empire over one woman. Cale adjusts his cuffs with chilling elegance, noting he has not destroyed anything yet. It reminds us that true power never needs to scream. It simply hands you a lit match and watches you burn. Let us pause and examine this beautifully brutal collision of egos. Cale is not simply threatening Adrian, he is surgically dismantling his universe. He leans into the light and lays out the sequence of annihilation. First the feds, then the board, and finally the absolute death blow. The senator's daughter, Adrian, calls a wife. Adrian is paralyzed, blood drained from his face as he realizes he brought a butter knife to a nuclear war. Cale smiles. It is a terrifying, dead-eyed curve of the lips, reminding Adrian that unlike cheap bullies, he actually pulls the trigger. The irony is suffocating, but the life lesson is exquisitely simple. The loudest man in the room is rarely the true threat. Genuine power remains utterly silent. It simply dismantles everything you have ever loved. The camera follows Cale to the door, letting that devastating reality settle deep into Adrian's bones. He leaves the ultimatum hanging in the dead air: walk away or lose the empire. Adrian tries to throw up one last pathetic shield, but Cale simply steps out, denying the man a single syllable of a final word. It is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The scene cuts back to Serafina, and the mood shatters like glass. 2 hours later, she is still curled up in the dim security office, like a frightened animal, staring at the glowing monitors. When Cale returns, she jolts, nearly spilling her coffee in panic. It is a harsh reminder for all of us. Walking away from a toxic situation is just the first step, but healing the mind takes so much longer. You and I know a cornered narcissist is a profoundly dangerous thing. Serafina knows it in her bones. When Cale claims Adrian will back off, she desperately wants to buy into that logic. But trauma bonds do not vanish because someone commands them to. Her voice trembles as she whispers her fear out loud, asking what happens if Adrian refuses to stop. Watch the lighting here. This is the frame where Cale's mask drops. He looks her dead in the eyes and promises to make him regret it. The chilling certainty in his voice is terrifying to witness. It teaches us a grim but vital truth. Sometimes polite boundaries are not enough to stop a predator. You need someone willing to stand in the absolute dark and fight the monsters on their own brutal terms. The saddest part of this beautifully framed exchange is Serafina, shrinking back into the shadows. She quietly reminds him that she never asked for a white knight, far too used to paying the agonizing price for the actions of violent men. Cale does not argue. The camera pushes in as his pale eyes lock onto hers, and he drops the most tragic truth of the film. Someone should have stepped between them 2 years ago. Someone should have seen the dark bruises she was hiding and made the nightmare end. Her defensive walls finally crack, hot tears spilling over, because hearing that out loud is a profound grief. She tells him it is not his job to fix her life. But Cale reminds us of a beautiful life lesson. You do not have to be responsible for someone's brokenness to help them heal. The brain does not switch off its screaming survival mode just because the immediate threat walked out the door. Cale tells her to go back to normal, but asking a victim to stop looking over their shoulder is like asking them to stop breathing. 3 agonizing days drag by in cinematic slow motion. The suffocating silence from Adrian is somehow worse than the abuse, because her mind is hardwired to expect the final blow. By the 4th night, the tension in the dimly lit room is thick enough to choke on. She is nervously organizing his study when Cale walks in with wine. She tries to hide behind the busy work, but he sees right through the fragile facade. He knows she is terrified. The lesson here is to always give yourself grace. Healing is rarely a straight line, and sometimes you just need a moment of quiet. Watch her body language in this tragic scene. Cale pours 2 glasses without asking, and Serafina automatically takes 1. It is that deeply ingrained conditioning. She obeys the quiet commands of powerful men without a single conscious thought. She weakly protests drinking on the job, but Cale offers a faint smile and tells her she is getting a promotion. It is almost sweet, but then the camera deliberately lingers on the glass. It is a French vintage, the exact wine Adrian drank while cruelly mocking her lack of class. After a few sips loosen her frayed nerves, she asks how he knew his dark threat would work. Cale simply swirls the red liquid in the dim light. It is a powerful reminder that the ghosts of our past will always sit at our table, but we get to choose if we drink with them. Cale lays out the brutal anatomy of a tyrant. He explains that men like Adrian build their entire lives on the fragile glass illusion of absolute control. The second you shatter that mirror, they fold completely. It is a brilliant analysis, but Sarafina points out the glaring hypocrisy. Kale is also a man who rules his world with an iron fist. The air in the room suddenly becomes heavy. A dark shadow crosses Kale's sharp features, and he drops a line that hits like a freight train. He whispers that he knows the boundary between control and cruelty. Adrian never did. It is such a devastating distinction. The life lesson here is profound. Power itself is not inherently evil. What truly matters is having the self-awareness to know where your shadows end and someone else's begins. This is the frame where the emotional vault clicks open. Kale never talks about his guarded past, but here he is dropping the darkest chapter of his life. He tells her his sister died of an overdose at 19. He does not soften the blow. He clinically calls it an escape from their violently abusive father. And here is where the scene breaks your heart. Sarafina instantly absorbs his heavy pain. She is so conditioned to carry the baggage of broken men that she starts apologizing to him. But Kale refuses her pity. He proves he recognizes Adrian's exact brand of poison in her veins. The takeaway here is a beautiful truth. The deepest bonds are rarely built on flawless perfection. They are forged in the quiet moments when two people finally recognize each other's hidden scars. The conversation takes a bone-chilling turn. When she asks what happened to his father, Kale's eyes go entirely dead. He calmly states that the man learned what happens when you push a victim too far. He does not confess to murder, but the lethal implication hangs in the room like a loaded gun. Fast forward 1 week, and the fragile illusion of safety shatters. Sarafina is walking home when she spots Adrian. Her reaction is utterly visceral. Her nervous system just shuts down. The groceries slip out of her numb hands, apples rolling into the dirty gutter. Adrian just stands there, silently feeding off the sheer terror he can still inflict on her without lifting a single finger. It reminds us of a heavy truth. Walking away is a singular event, but truly breaking free is an exhausting daily battle. You and I have seen some sick manipulation tactics, but this one takes the prize. Adrian flashes her a warm, melancholic smile, the exact kind that used to mean she was safe. He silently mouths the words, "I miss you." It is a calculated strike at her trauma bond, designed to scramble her fragile brain. Sarafina immediately starts to dissociate. Her vision tunnels, and she forgets how to breathe. She needs to run, but the chains of abuse have bolted her to the concrete. Just as she is about to collapse, Kale steps directly into the frame. He physically blocks Adrian from her sight, severing that toxic visual leash. He demands her focus, forcing his grounded reality over her waking nightmare. The lesson is vital. When the dark past tries to drag you under, find someone who fiercely anchors you to the present. The way the camera frames Kale handling her panic is brilliant. He does not smother her. He stays close, giving her paralyzed nervous system the quiet space to remember how to function. Once the roaring in her ears fades, she whispers a broken question, terrified her abuser is still watching. Kale slowly scans the street with the cold eyes of an apex predator. Adrian is gone. The adrenaline completely abandons Sarafina, and she drops heavily to the curb. She actually believed the nightmare was over, but to a narcissist, a boundary is just a twisted invitation. Kale crouches beside her, and you see the exact moment the protector dies and the hunter wakes up. He pulls out his phone with lethal intent. It shows us that true protection is not just offering a safe harbor. It is being willing to sink the enemy ships. Let us appreciate the sheer cinematic terror of a man who stops playing by the rules. Kale does not care about his security team's logistical excuses. He demands immediate location data. This is not a man who calls the police and waits for a court order. This is a man who enforces his own brutal justice. He gets Serafina on her trembling feet, ignoring the spilled groceries, and marches her straight into the glowing control center. The room is absolute chaos. Kale cuts through the noise and demands the visual feed. The screen shows Adrian pulling off his sick little stunt. He stands perfectly still for 90 agonizing seconds, smiling into the lens like a malicious ghost, and simply vanishes. He just wanted to prove he still owned her fear. The lesson? Never let a ghost convince you that they still own the house. Picture this cinematic shot. Adrian slips into the dark subway, perfectly aware of the cameras tracking him. This is not stalking anymore. He is actively playing a psychological game of dominance. Look at Serafina watching Kale from the doorway. She sees right through his tailored suit to the ruthless kingpin underneath. Kale barks out new orders to his security team, like a military general preparing for war. Nobody gets within 50 feet. Then he turns to Serafina and strictly confines her to the glass penthouse. In his mind, he is being the ultimate protector, but the bitter, tragic irony. For a woman who just escaped a mental prison, his heavy-handed protection feels exactly like the cage she just broke out of. Sometimes, the towering walls built to keep monsters out just make you feel like a captive all over again. Let us pause and examine the wreckage of this frame together. Serafina presses her trembling hands against the bulletproof glass, begging for her ordinary life back. But Kale delivers the freezing truth. The predator has crossed a sacred line. His voice remains steady, yet the black void in his eyes speaks only of murder. The tragedy has shifted course. Cut to the dead of night, shadows swallowing Serafina as trauma tightens its grip. Her shattered mind projects Adrian's cruel smile against the dark. This is the ultimate tragedy of a wounded heart, the way terror disguises itself as love. Sometimes, the deepest scars are left by those we trusted most. Defeated by her frayed nerves, she drifts into the cold silence of 3 in the morning. She discovers Kale in the dim kitchen. The air around him vibrates with an obsessive hunger for the hunt. The sweeping marble island is buried beneath a mountain of surveillance bank records, photographs, the absolute anatomy of a ruined man. When Serafina's voice wavers, asking what this means, Kale whispers that it is everything. His eyes are painfully bloodshot, but his focus cuts like a sharpened blade. He confesses his peaceful warning to Adrian was a failure. The narcissist dared to call his bluff. Kale slowly aligns the paper stacks with chilling precision. The era of polite threats has ended. He has fully transformed from protector to executioner. It reminds us that true darkness rarely shouts, it arrives in a quiet, calculated whisper. Serafina breathes the heavy question into the silent room, her slender frame shaking. She feels the sheer violence radiating from his skin. Kale offers a chilling justification he will cross any moral boundary required. He views Adrian's obsession not as romance, but as a peasant disrespecting a king's domain. Adrian handled her like a stolen artifact, and Kale's dark pride refuses to forgive. She begs him now, pleading against irreversible bloodshed. Yet Kale casually promises his conscience will remain clear. He dissects Adrian's sick game with terrifying accuracy, exposing how her isolation was built. It is a devastating realization. Sometimes, it takes a true monster to deeply comprehend the dark mechanics of another monster's mind. Lays out the agonizing truth of her 6-month hunt, speaking with the slow rhythm of a funeral dirge. Then, he makes an absolute vow the nightmare dies tonight. Notice the tragic psychology unfolding here. Kale's lethal edge should send any rational soul fleeing, yet, for a woman who has never known a defender, his murderous aura feels like a fortress. Sarafina is a mosaic of shattered glass, yearning to watch her tormentor turn to ash. She surrenders, whispering her submission. Kale reaches out, his steady hand swallowing hers. Where Adriana's touch was a snare, Kale's grip offers a dangerous sanctuary. He asks only for blind faith. Life often teaches us a grim lesson. Sometimes, the only true shield against a demon is a much darker devil. She surrenders her trust completely. To witness her fractured spirit bind itself to this lethal guardian is a masterclass in tragic beauty. Soon after, Kale orchestrates a symphony of destruction upon Adrian's immaculate life. The wealthy wife files for divorce, and the gruesome details of his betrayal flood the morning news. The camera lingers on Sarafina, her mind trembling as she realizes her untouchable abuser is finally bleeding. Kale steps into the frame, deeply anchored in the chaos he birthed. He does not ask if she saw the news. He feels it in the air. The era of hiding in the shadows is over. They have stepped onto a brightly lit stage of survival. We learn quickly that conquering our deepest fear often requires burning the entire stage to the ground. As she questions the cruelty of his methods, Kale gives a remorseless shrug. He dismantled the man using the jagged edge of truth, handing the wife every poisoned secret under the guise of mercy. Panic seizes Sarafina, warning that Adrian will know who fired the bullet. A terrifying smirk goes across Kale's lips. He wants Adrian to choke on his defeat. Retaliation strikes when suits swarm Kale's empire in a desperate display of power, easily swatted away by his legal armor. Pay close attention to this pivotal frame. The shift in the atmosphere reveals everything. This is no longer a rescue. It is a blood-soaked arena where two scarred apex predators will fight until only one breathes. Pride is a heavy poison that always blinds a man to his own ruin. Kale absorbs the assault on his empire without a tremor of emotion. He drops the phone and pierces her with a look of command, ordering her to pack immediately. Her fragile defenses flare, longing to remain in the illusion of safety. Kale shatters the fantasy with freezing logic. Adrian's mind is fracturing, transforming the city into a concrete death trap. Under the cover of twilight, they bleed out of Manhattan in an armored vehicle. Kale commands the wheel himself. He banished his entire security detail, knowing that, in the darkest hours, trust is a fatal luxury. When she whispers into the dark, asking their destination, he names a ghost house in the woods. True survival often demands leaving everything behind. To embrace the terrifying, absolute unknown. Walk with me through the 6 weeks. As the city bleeds into darkness, the true emotional artery of the film is exposed. Sarafina offers him an escape. Her voice is a fragile whisper, insisting he could have cast her aside to spare himself the ruin. It is a tragic portrait of trauma, a soul so conditioned by cruelty that she anticipates her own disposal. But Kale's knuckles bleach white against the steering wheel. The stoic kingpin refuses the cowardice exit. When pushed, his mask of apathy finally shatters. He confesses her life actually matters to him. For a man who trades lives like currency, this is a monumental surrender. He will not let a lesser beast destroy his only light. Love, in its most desperate form, requires us to fight fiercely for the ones who have forgotten how to heal. Let us pause here to absorb the profound shift in the cinematic palette. This hidden sanctuary is the antithesis of his sterile glass empire. We are enveloped in rich mahogany, weeping stone, and a forest that swallows the outside world. Kale guides her to a warm room, commanding her to rest. Yet, the deep grooves of trauma cannot be erased by embers. Her nervous system remains a battlefield. She lies frozen in the breathless dark, anticipating Adrian's inevitable arrival. Her terror is chillingly valid. Adrian is a starving predator, stripped of his wealth, his mask, and his power. A narcissist robbed of his reflection does not fade away. He morphs into a devastating hurricane of vengeance. It teaches us a haunting truth. We only truly know a man's darkest nature when every comfort is violently stripped away. Exhaustion finally pulls her under the dark surface of panic. She awakens to the aroma of coffee, finding Kale performing an unnervingly domestic ritual. To an outsider, the morning is serene, but to a heart bound by traumatic chains, this sudden warmth is a physical ache in her chest. He hands her a steaming mug, their eyes never meeting. The unsaid words hang heavy in the quiet air. Kale breaks the silence, his tone clinical. His legal soldiers are burying Adrian under a fortress of restraining orders. Kale knows mere paper cannot halt a rabid animal. It is a masterful game of chess. He is constructing a flawless alibi, so that when the blood inevitably spills, the law will stand in his favor. True peace is an illusion. It is often just the deep, silent breath a warrior takes right before the dawn of a brutal war. Kale lays out the grim arithmetic of Adrian's madness. The authorities are circling. His empire is crumbling. Kale draws a stark boundary. Within 2 weeks, Adrian will either vanish or completely fracture and come for their lives. Now the camera pushes in for a terrifying revelation. Kale holds her gaze, his eyes did, and vows to personally put the man in the earth. The delivery is stripped of hesitation. Rather than feeling safe, Serafina's veins run with ice. She realizes with crushing weight that he is entirely willing to surrender his humanity to end this. She leans close, begging him not to butcher his own soul, just to condemn Adrian to the flames. It is a haunting truth we must all learn. To defeat the devil, one must be incredibly careful not to put on his horns. Let us step back and look at the agonizing symmetry of this moment together. The horror of this frame is not his descent into violence. It is the unblinking way Kale stares into her soul, presenting himself as a shield rather than a harbinger of death. When she challenges this, his restraint cracks for a singular heartbeat. He refuses to let the situation fracture, because a shattered plan is a fatal loss of control. He calmly gathers the plates while Serafina remains frozen, her mind a spiraling tempest. We feel the suffocating weight of her tragic realization. Did she truly escape the burning inferno of a madman, only to step inside the freezing, perfectly controlled glass cage of another? The deepest tragedy is that our most desperate choices often become our heaviest chains. For 5 solitary days, the world ceases to exist, sealed behind drawn velvet curtains. By day, Kyle commands his corporate empire from the kitchen table, orchestrating financial ruin like a ruthless warlord arranging pawns. But as dusk bleeds into night, the amber glow of the fireplace strips away their armor. She confesses the bitter irony, a scholar of coercive control. She had become the textbook victim of her own studies. The tragic lesson here is that pure intellect is no shield against the creeping poison of a charismatic abuser. By the 5th night, the fragile peace shatters. She tearfully begs to know their ultimate fate. The firelight casts deep, hollow shadows across Kyle's face as he delivers a chilling vow. Adrian will be entirely erased from this earth, or he will dig his own grave. She desperately tries to pull him back from the edge. But Kyle is playing with a stacked deck. The camera pushes in slowly as he coldly recites the names of the absolute monsters he has already dismantled, men whose darkness makes Adrian look like a mere shadow. He guarantees her survival, but the terrifying caveat, whatever the cost, drops the temperature in the room. You can see the panic rising in her chest, terrified that he will sacrifice his soul for her. It is the classic projection of a damaged heart. Yet Kyle does not flinch. His expression remains carved from stone as he softly corrects her. He is not corrupting himself for her salvation. He embraced his own damnation decades ago. He is simply slipping the heavy chain off the predator within. You and I must brace ourselves, for this is the frame where the tragedy truly takes hold. When she whispers the question of why he is doing this, the silence that follows is suffocating. Kyle looks at her, the harsh lighting softening as it catches his eyes. He does not see a shattered bird. He looks upon her as a living miracle. He sees a woman dragged through hell, who crawled out and attempts to rebuild her mind piece by bloody piece. He tells her that such fierce resilience is a rarity in this bleak world, and he refuses to let the dark extinguish it. Fighting back bitter tears, she shrinks away from her own power. She presses her fragile spine against the rising window pane, whispering her absolute terror of finally breaking into useless dust. She lays bare the tragic fear of every survivor, the dread that her fractured mind simply lacks the foundation to withstand another earthquake. The camera focuses on Kyle's boots as he steps close, stopping just short of a touch. In this bleak narrative, restraint is the purest form of reverence. His deep voice rumbles, offering to lend her the ruthless machinery of his own mind until hers can mend. The profound life lesson here is that true protection does not smother. It stands as a fortress while the wounded heal inside. Kyle calmly notes Adrian's fatal flaw. His blinding ego prevents him from seeing how far a predator will go to defend his own. The mounting tension is abruptly severed by the shrill vibration of a phone. The glowing screen sharply illuminates the darkness. Marcus is calling. Observe the physical shift in Kyle's frame. He turns instantly to absolute stone. The air in the room becomes dangerously brittle. He barks a sequence of rapid-fire questions into the receiver, tearing up their carefully laid plans and throwing the estate into a suffocating lockdown. He turns to her, delivering the crushing blow. Adrian has bypassed their perimeter and is waiting in their Manhattan lobby. The ensuing drive through the city is a cinematic study in restrained violence. Kyle's white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel chokes the leather. You can practically hear his blood boiling beneath the skin. His jaw is locked in a murderous clamp as he glares through the torrential rain lashing against the windshield. Beside him, Serafina unravels into quiet panic. Suddenly, the phone vibrates again. Marcus delivers a sickening update. Adrian has staked his claim in the lobby, weaponizing his arrogant patience to establish dominance. Serafina's breathing grows erratic, but Kyle remains an unblinking monument of marble. To him, this prey anchoring itself in one spot is a gift. Let us pause here together, you and I, to appreciate the silent calculus of an apex predator preparing for the kill. They descend into the subterranean garage just after midnight, the slick concrete reflecting like shattered black mirrors. Kyle kills the engine, plunging the cabin into heavy silence. He sits motionless in the dark. She begs to know his plan, her voice breaking in the shadows. His answer is a hollow, chilling whisper. He claims he is just going to talk. She knows the devastating truth immediately. Kyle never just talks. When she demands to know what changed, his head slowly pivots. His eyes are entirely vacant, yet the air smells strongly of ignited gasoline. He softly confesses to a grave miscalculation. He had attempted to wage a gentleman's war against an opponent who rejects reality. The vital life lesson here, applying logic to a raging narcissist, is like trying to reason with a burning house. The sharp click of his seatbelt releasing signals the death of all civility. Before she can draw a breath, he is out the door, stalking toward the elevator banks like an executioner. She scrambles wildly to follow his shadow. The silence inside that ascending metal cage is absolute suffocation. My Asgard fractures into pure survival mode, leading to a truly heartbreaking moment. She frantically offers to surrender herself the monster, just to make the fear stop. Kyle severs that thought instantly. He dissects Adrian's S6 strategy with surgical precision. This is not a negotiation. It is psychological terrorism, designed to prove her sanctuary is an illusion. Kyle names the demon absolute psychological warfare. His voice drops into a dark, resonant frequency, vowing that they will endure this bloodshed side by side. The elevator chimes, the steel doors sliding apart on the 42nd floor to reveal an anxious Marcus. Adrian is literally using the bright, exposed lights of a public lobby as an impenetrable legal shield to execute his mental torture. Kyle shifts instantly into the cold commander of a battlefield. He orders Marcus to drag Serafina into the impenetrable penthouse vault. Her chin trembles as she attempts to stand her ground and face the architect of her ruin. But Kyle holds her gaze with an iron intensity, silently obliterating her defiance. He makes it devastatingly clear that preserving her life is the only acceptable victory. She weeps in frustration as Marcus physically maneuvers her into the secure corridor. Over her shoulder, she is forced to watch Kyle descend into the jaws of the beast. Far below, the cavernous marble lobby is entirely deserted, save for the author of this tragedy. Adrian Mercer lounges on a pristine leather sofa, radiating a sickly, triumphant glow. The camera frames Adrian in his pathetic masquerade. He is draped in top-tier fabrics, desperately projecting the aura of a legitimate businessman rather than a deranged stalker. As Kyle's heavy boots echo across the marble floor, Adrian rises. He paints on a greasy, theatrical smile, acting thankful for the audience. Kyle does not even grant him a blink. He closes the distance with the slow momentum of a freight train, halting only when the air between their faces vanishes. A terrified night guard hovers at the perimeter. Without shifting his murderous gaze from Adrian, Kyle issues a guttural command for the guard to leave. The young man flees into the shadows, leaving these two predators sealed together in the sprawling, dimly lit tomb. Torrential rain violently hammers against the floor-to-ceiling glass, bleeding the city lights into a smeared canvas. It is the perfect atmospheric dread for the psychological slaughter about to unfold. Kyle attempts to assert dominance, commanding the room. But Adrian executes the ultimate narcissistic deflection. He merely tilts his head, refusing to acknowledge his insignificance. He spins a delusional fantasy of a profound romantic history, dismissing Kyle as a mere hired thug. The light permanently dies in Kyle's eyes. He delivers a brutal, magnificent truth. Stalking a shattered woman until her spirit suffocates is not romance. It is parasitic abuse. You and I are about to watch him mentally dismantle this arrogant parasite piece by bloody piece. We need to pause the frame right here. You and I must analyze this masterclass in textbook manipulation. Notice the subtle twitch as Adrian's cool facade finally cracks. He minimizes his reign of terror, reducing severe psychological abuse to merely standing on a sidewalk and sending bouquets. The tragic reality of the abuser is that they genuinely cast themselves as the misunderstood savior. He steps into Kyle's orbit, weaponizing his height to claim his actions were born of love. Kyle anchors his boots, bracing for the violence of a street fight. But here lies the bitterest twist. Adrian does not swing a fist. Instead, his pale hand slips into his coat and retrieves a smartphone. Because in this vicious arena, a brightly lit screen will lacerate Kyle's soul far deeper than any blade. Adrian presents the screen with the merciless precision of a surgeon. He coldly taps the timestamp 8 months ago, weeks before her disappearance. The camera pans down to the footage. There sits Sarafina in a warmly lit restaurant, her hand intimately resting over Marcus Chen-S. She radiates a light, untethered energy that Kyle has never been permitted to witness. Adrian narrates the betrayal like a prosecutor delivering a death sentence. He details their secret 6-week affair, twisting the psychological knife. The recording ends as they walk out into the night together. It is an excruciating revelation, highlighting a harrowing life lesson. A suffocating mind will desperately claw for any exit, even if it requires weaving a massive web of deceit just to survive another day. Picture the room. The oxygen simply vanishes, leaving Kyle suffocating in the slate-gray light. You can almost hear his entire reality cracking. Adrian stands bathed in the cold glow of his smartphone, his voice unnervingly calm. He admits to the stalkers, but twists the blade, perfectly claiming Sarafina was the one who drove him to madness. He pockets the phone, his face melting into a flawless, tragic portrait of a betrayed lover. It is the ultimate theft. A predator stealing the victim's bleeding narrative. His voice fractures at the exact right moment, swearing he only wanted peace. Kyle remains utterly frozen in the shadows. The harshest lesson we ever learn is this: the deadliest weapon a man can face is a masterful lie that turns his own noble heart against him. The camera pulls tight on Kyle's face. His mind spins out of control, desperate to find the hidden seam in this forgery. But the footage is brutally clear. When he accuses Adrian of lying, the tremor in his own voice gives him away. He is a drowning man grasping at smoke. Adrian catches the scent of blood in the water instantly. His face hardens into a mask of righteous fury. Demanding Kyle ask Sarafina about her secret meetings with the banker. Kyle's knuckles turn bone white as his fists clench. He commands the man to get out, his shout echoing against the glass walls. Adrian turns, framed by the door, yet lingers to play the wounded saint one last time. It is a tragic truth of human nature. Those who break us will always demand the privilege of writing our final chapter. Adrian drops his venomous warning, telling Kyle his hero complex will be his undoing. Then he is gone. The door clicks shut, leaving a suffocating silence, broken only by the relentless rain against the window pane. Kyle stands paralyzed, the foundation of his life turning to dust beneath his feet. We fade to black, reopening 40 minutes later in the penthouse. Sarafina wears a path into the rug, a frantic moth caught in a jar. She throws panicked questions the moment Kyle steps inside, but the words die in her throat. His face is chiseled from marble. The warmth she relied on is completely extinguished. He looks right through her soul and quietly asks what she knows about Marcus Chen. It reminds us of a bitter reality. A life built on shadows will always shatter in the light. Watch her body here, because the tragedy is absolute. The instant he speaks that name, the blood vanishes from her face. Her hands flutter like dying birds. Kyle watches this damning reaction, and the heavy door of denial slams shut in his mind. Sarafina scrambles for excuses, but Kyle slices through the noise. He demands a simple yes or no, his tone so hollow it hurts worse than any scream. Real tears spill down her cheeks as the confession slips past her lips. Kyle physically recoils. He retreats to his study, pouring a dark drink to give his trembling hands a purpose. She trails behind him, clinging to the horrors of her past to justify her deceit. But the truth is merciless. The pain we carry from yesterday never gives us the right to poison the trust we receive today. Kyle steps into the harsh light, tearing her carefully woven story to shreds. He maps out her betrayal, the calculated lies, and the reckless steps that gave her abuser the ammunition he craved. Serafina shakes like a leaf, begging him to understand her terror. She paints a harrowing picture of surviving a tyrant, suffocating under constant surveillance. Marcus was her stolen breath of air, a brief illusion of normalcy where she was simply heard. She swears the 3 meetings were entirely innocent, yet the tragic flaw in her design is glaring. She built a fortress of lies to escape a monster, hiding behind the paralyzing fear of retaliation. It is a heartbreaking reality. Sometimes our most desperate struggles to survive only end up building us a brand new cage. She understood her tormentor's mind, knowing he would weaponize any misstep to justify his cruelty. But then Kyle delivers a blow that stops her heart. With surgical coldness, he suggests her deceit was the match that lit the fire, rather than a mere reaction to it. The accusation sends her staggering backward. The camera holds on Kyle as he spirals into his own abyss. He hurls her tragic tale back at her, recounting every law he fractured and the powerful man he ruined in her name. He waged a holy war wearing a blindfold. Beneath his unblinking stare, you witness the agonizing death of his pride. He was never the knight, he was just a pawn. True betrayal does not merely break our hearts, it reaches deep inside and completely destroys our reflection in the mirror. He pins her with a gaze devoid of humanity, blaming her for incinerating their foundation of absolute trust. She cries out, desperate to preserve the sanctity of her suffering. Then the statue breaks. Kyle unleashes a thunderous roar of sheer agony that makes her recoil. It is a terrifying slip of his mask. He closes his eyes, pulls air into his lungs, and locks the beast away. When his eyes reopen, nothing remains but glacial ice. He quietly orders her to pack her bags. Serafina shatters, assuming this is simply a firing. But his voice drips with poison as he reclassifies her as a compromised asset. He ignores her crying, convinced every tear is just theatrical manipulation. We must remember trust, once shattered, turns every future plea into an empty stage play. Let us look closer, you and I. Kyle is doing something far more violent than evicting her. He is dismantling her very identity. He strips away the crown of the innocent martyr, exposing a woman sprinting from her own deceits. He drifts toward the window, staring into the bleak city night. His voice drops into a whisper as he mourns his arrogance, a man who built an empire on reading shadows only to be blinded by a woman's tears. He marched into hell for a story he never verified. His internal compass is shattered. Serafina's legs surrender, collapsing into a chair. She chants her horrific past like a desperate prayer, begging him to believe the abuse was real. We must learn this painful lesson. A half-truth is simply a beautiful, destructive lie. She pours out her trauma, the hidden cameras, the isolation, the twisted games built to destroy her sanity. Kyle absorbs the details, heavy with a bone-deep exhaustion. But his boundary is made of iron. He tells her that suffering in the past does not grant permission to lie to the hands saving you today. She tries to split hairs between lying and withholding, but his cold correction cuts her down. Silence swallows the room, broken only by the rain punishing the glass. The city moves on, indifferent to the absolute annihilation of their bond. When she finally asks what he expects, he demands the impossible. He needs her to stand in his shoes and feel his total ruin. A wound can never truly heal while someone is still holding the knife. So here we are at the bitter end. Let us look at the wreckage together. Who truly won this tragic game? Kyle confesses he feels like a discarded tool, and she cannot even deny it. She painted an immaculate portrait of a dragon and a helpless princess, pulling his every string. It is the dark side of survival. She became so fluent in manipulating her tormentor, she instinctively manipulated her savior. This leaves us with an agonizing question. Does a victim's desperate deception erase the original sin of the abuser? Kyle no longer cares. He points to the door. When she sobs about having nothing left, he pulls out his phone and transfers $20,000 to her account. It is a brutal, sterile transaction that severs them forever. Love always dies kissed in the absolute cold. Notice how devoid of warmth this farewell is. He calls the money a simple severance package, excising every trace of humanity from the room. That crushing finality shatters her remaining psychological armor. Watch her trembling hands as she retreats toward the exit. She whispers an apology, but beneath the tears lies a bitter irony. She does not regret burning the world down to escape her abuser's matrix. Kyle just stands there, a hollow shell of the man he once was. We cut to 15 minutes later. Her entire existence is crammed into 2 cheap canvas bags. Resting at the top is a worn-out paperback on coercive control. It sits there like a quiet tombstone, marking the grave of a sanctuary just blown to pieces. True safety is a fragile luxury the broken can rarely afford. We witness the fallout of an acute mental collapse. Marcus, the loyal driver, watches from the doorway as she zips up her ruined life. He quietly offers a ride. She weaves a pathetic excuse about catching a subway at 2 in the morning. He shakes his head, piercing her facade. Her spirit is completely drained. The elevator descent is a suffocating silence. Marcus loads her bags and asks for her destination. She whispers the address of a Brooklyn shelter, the exact purgatory she hid in 6 months ago. Gliding across the dark bridge, Marcus breaks his professional wall. Catching her eyes in the rearview mirror, he softly says that he believes her. It is a vital reminder that even in our most devastating chapters, a single act of human grace can keep us breathing. The camera pushes tight on Serafina, neon streetlights, washing her face in harsh flashes. Her trauma violently hijacks her nervous system. She whips around, ironed, eyes wide with animal terror. Does Marcus know what Adrian did? Marcus remains a statue, his gaze locked on the dark road. He quietly admits he has driven Kyle for 8 years and never seen the man unravel. Kyle only fights for people in genuine danger. Yet, whatever poisoned lie Adrian fed him tonight made a man of steel doubt his own mind. Serafina asks if she deserves this hell. Marcus does not flinch. He tells her the truth is far uglier than anyone wants to accept. You and I have probably both made this mistake, running from the dark. But to survive, you must look your own brokenness directly in the eye. Before the sedan pulls away, Marcus offers a lifeline she never asked for, telling her to call if the shadows close in. Her captivity trauma instantly sharpens her tone. Why would Kyle's loyal man ever extend a hand? Marcus returns, his expression heavy with quiet sorrow. He tells her that working for a powerful man does not require selling your own soul. He offers a crisp card. Her trembling fingers accept it just as the taillights bleed into the fog. Picture the absolute isolation of this wide shot. It is 3 in the morning. She stands shivering on a frozen Brooklyn sidewalk, clutching $20,000 that burns like dirty money. The shelter turns her away, dragging her heavy bags. She surrenders to a cheap Lower East Side hostel, a rotting building dripping with quiet, suffocating desperation. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? This is where the psychological pressure cooker boils over. The grimy room costs $50. Through thin walls, the muffled weeping of strangers seeps into her skull. She lies on a stained mattress, gripping the edge of sanity, when her phone vibrates. An unknown number. Her heart hammers violently. The screen glows. In the dark, I heard you left Kyle's place. My door is always open. Adrian. He moves like a phantom, ensuring his presence chokes the air she breathes. She blocks him, clinging to a fragile illusion of control. 10 seconds later, a new number lights up. You cannot run from the truth forever. This is the tragic art of a true predator. They do not just build a cage. They make you realize the cage never had any doors. That is the frame where her emotional dam shatters. With a guttural cry, she hurls the phone against the peeling wallpaper. She drags the scratchy blanket over her head, weeping violently for the first time in weeks, just to purge the poison from her veins. For 3 days, the camera follows a ghost. She drifts through the concrete grid in hollow dissociation, surviving on bitter coffee and the lonely armor of being invisible. She begs for cash jobs in dim kitchens where no one asks for a name, but the city ignores her. On the 4th morning, the cracked phone rings. Her instincts scream to ignore it, but the terror of starvation forces her hand. A calm, elegant voice speaks. Catherine Mercer. When isolation pulls you under, even a stranger's voice sounds like salvation. The camera cuts tight as Sarafina jolts upright on the stained mattress, trembling as she demands the caller's identity. Catherine drops a devastating truth. She is Adrian's ex-wife, and time is running out. Sarafina spirals, terrified of how this woman found her. But Catherine's cold composure slices through the panic. She warns that Adrian is no longer just playing a shadow in the night. He is actively weaponizing the justice system. He intends to sue Kyle, positioning Sarafina as his star witness. The room's audio fades, leaving only Sarafina's shallow breathing as her blood turns to ice. Catherine reveals Adrian has been obsessively recording their every move. Here is the tragic lesson of this dark world. Give a hollow soul enough wealth, and they will forge the law itself into a butcher's knife. Bending reality is the signature of a psychological architect. Catherine explains Adrian is weaving a beautiful, deeply sick fairy tale. He casts himself as the victim, claiming a predatory billionaire stole his fragile girlfriend. Catherine knows it is fabricated, but Adrian is a genius at dressing fiction in a tailored suit. He has a mountain of ruin prepared, secretly filmed videos of Sarafina, purchased testimonies calling her unhinged, and a brutal paper trail of Kyle's $20,000. For a fraction of a second, Catherine's absolute composure cracks. She whispers that he will annihilate them both if they do not strike back. Sarafina begins to hyperventilate, clutching her chest, desperately begging to know why an ex-wife would ever risk her own skin to save a total stranger. Listen to the cold cadence of Catherine's warning. She states that once Adrian decides you slighted him, he will not rest until your existence is a smoking crater. His thirst for destruction is biblical. She demands a meeting in 2 hours in absolute secrecy. The line dies. A Tribeca dress materializes on the screen. Sarafina sits paralyzed, her heart battering her ribs like a dying bird. Every fractured nerve screams this is a fatal setup. What if this woman is just another piece on Adrian's twisted chessboard? Come with me, we are about to find out what happens when a cornered animal must choose. Here is the tragic irony of survival. If Adrian is truly hunting Kyle, running away only delays the slaughter. Deep, suffocating fear drags her right back toward the open flames. Driven by adrenaline and dread, Sarafina arrives at the Tribeca Cafe 45 minutes early. She wraps shaking hands around a black coffee, shrinking into the darkest corner of the room. Her eyes remain fixed on the glass door like a soldier awaiting an ambush. Precisely on the hour, Catherine Mercer steps into the frame. The contrast is jarring. She is wrapped in the quiet, lethal armor of generational wealth. Her hair is drawn back with painful precision, her posture flawless. She radiates the terrifying calm of a woman who treats psychological warfare as a mild hobby. Her sharp eyes lock onto Sarafina instantly. She glides across the polished floor, slipping into the opposite chair without a single sound. "Thank you for coming," she murmurs softly. And just like that, the surgeon prepares the scalpel for her first cut. The camera lingers on Sarafina's trembling hands. She whispers she probably should not have come. Catherine nods, her voice smooth as polished glass. She agrees it was a risk. But sitting here proves she is finally ready to wake up. With deliberate grace, Catherine slides a tablet across the table, illuminating the terrifying architecture of Adrian's obsession. He has been constructing this psychological guillotine for months. A single tap reveals drafted legal complaints, surveillance photographs, and hacked private message logs. Bile rises hot in Sarafina's throat. She chokes out a wasp, asking if he is actually suing Kyle. Catherine's unblinking gaze never wavers. "Not yet," she replies. But he is already poisoning the soil, contacting financial boards to slowly suffocate Kyle's empire. We are witnessing a scorched earth isolation campaign. Adrian is calling Kyle's financial backers, painting a disturbing portrait of a corrupt billionaire destroying a helpless man. Sarafina cannot breathe, paralyzed by the sheer sociopathy of the man she once loved. "This is insane," she whispers. Catherine's features remain perfectly still. "This is Adrian," she replies, her tone completely dead. "He chooses you. He builds the cage, and then he locks the door." Sarafina's cup rattles against the saucer as she asks the defining question. "Why risk your own neck for me?" Catherine's eyes darken with old grief. She confesses she spent 5 agonizing years married to a ghost who convinced her she was losing her mind. Here is the truth of a trauma bond. The survivors always recognize the scars. Stick with me, because the brutal reality check is here. Catherine locks eyes with Sarafina, admitting she only saved Adrian because her family had bottomless wealth. He could not drown a dynasty. But Sarafina is alone. Catherine maps it out with ruthless clarity. Without her help, Adrian will grind them to dust. Shrinking back, Sarafina asks the price of salvation. The demand is terrifying. The ugly, unfiltered truth. Every toxic secret she hid from Kyle. Sarafina panics, insisting she already confessed, but Catherine slices through the delusion. She only fed Kyle a sanitized fairy tale. Adrian is currently framing her as a manipulative, unstable liar. If she refuses to drag her deepest sins into the light, Adrian's sick fiction becomes their permanent reality. "Prove him wrong," she commands. Camera pushes in as the emotional surgery begins. Catherine demands every rusted piece of the wreckage, the affair, the lies, the exact moment the rot set in. She needs that dirt to detonate Adrian's lawsuit early. Sarafina turns completely still. Imagine the horror of looking a stranger in the eye and confessing the most shameful sins of your life. The lighting feels heavy as she calculates the damage. She whispers that if she speaks, Kyle will know she lied. Catherine shatters that illusion without a blink. Kyle already knows. He already saw through the mask. The only question is whether Sarafina will let her shame drown them both, or if she is finally ready to fight. You can physically see the weight of that reality crush her final excuse. She closes her eyes, takes a ragged breath, and begins to confess. You and I are going to unpack this together. There are no perfect victims. The camera pushes in slowly on Serafina. She sits under the harsh lights of Catherine's office, shoulders completely slumped. She is finally spilling 8 months of suffocating secrets, the hidden affair with Marcus, the desperate lies. Catherine simply hits save on the silver voice recorder, her face completely still. Serafina's trauma handed Adrian the exact ammunition he needed. Catherine's counterattack is an unrelenting legal strike, harassment, stalking. It is a freezing, brutal strategy. Here is a simple truth for you. The only way to strip a monster of their power is to bravely look at your own ugly mistakes in the mirror and own every single one of them before they get used against you. Look at the absolute wreckage here. Catherine paces the room, trying to force a logical strategy. But the lens shifts to Serafina, whose hands tremble violently. She is drowning in pure guilt over Kyle. She dragged a completely innocent man into her personal war zone. Catherine gently tells her to let Kyle make his choices, but Serafina knows the bitter reality. Kyle's emotional walls are already 20 feet high. He threw her out because her betrayal cut him straight to the bone. They are two people bleeding out from old wounds. It is painful to witness. It brings us to a harsh reality. When you completely shatter someone's trust with endless deception, you cannot just whisper an apology and expect the house to stand. The foundation is already reduced to dust. Catherine reads the room with surgical precision. Seeing the rising panic, she steps away, leaving Serafina alone in a crowded coffee shop. The noise only makes her isolation feel heavier. Suddenly, her phone vibrates against the wooden table. A text from Marcus. The blood instantly drains from her pale face. An article just dropped online. A calculated corporate assassination aimed directly at Kyle. Everyone knows Adrian pulled the trigger. This is how the real monsters play the game. They do not just strike you. They burn down anyone standing close to you. It leaves a pit in your stomach. True power has nothing to do with wealth. It is the terrifying, quiet ability to completely dismantle another human being's life without ever leaving the comfort of your desk. You can literally watch her body shut down in real time. Her fingers shake so violently the phone slips. Adrian dropped a fatal bomb on Kyle's career. Suffocating in guilt, Serafina bolts through the glass doors and throws herself into a cab. 20 minutes later, she bursts into Kyle's lobby. Marcus is stationed at the front desk, looking completely exhausted. He gives her a look of deep, heartbreaking pity before delivering the final blow. Kyle refuses to let her upstairs. She is a drowning woman desperately trying to patch the very ship she sank. Guilt is an incredibly dangerous driver. It will make you sprint across the city with burning tears in your eyes, but it rarely leads to a rational decision. It usually just leaves more ruined lives in its wake. Stick with me, because this is where the tension becomes unbearable. Marcus takes a massive risk and radios up to the penthouse. The voice that echoes back through that tiny speaker is utterly dead. Kyle coldly threatens to fire Marcus on the spot if he breaks protocol. Marcus simply lowers the radio, his shoulders dropping. Serafina falls apart, begging for a chance to fix the nightmare she caused. Then, the brass elevator doors slide open. Kyle steps out. The sight of him is a brutal shock. The man who always wore his power-like armor is shattered. His suit is wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. It is a sobering lesson we all must face eventually. No matter how perfectly you construct your fake exterior, profound grief will burn it all down in an hour, leaving nothing but raw pain. The camera lingers on Kyle's face. His dark eyes are entirely hollow, as if the spirit behind them has simply vanished. Safrafina reaches out, her voice cracking as she desperately apologizes. But Kyle does not flinch. He stands there like a statue carved from ice. He quietly dismantles her excuses, reminding her that his existence depended on absolute control. He feels no sympathy for her good intentions. Every single word he speaks acts like a precision scalpel, cutting her to the bone. It is a cruel, unchanging rule of human nature. When you pull the pin on a live grenade, your regret does not stop the blast. Our choices are the only things that leave a permanent mark. Apologies are just wind blowing through the ruins. Kyle methodically strips away her final shred of hope. He calmly lists the destruction she brought, but to his door the looming legal nightmare, his tarnished legacy, and the absolute murder of his ability to trust. She pleads for redemption, but he gives her nothing but a terrifying blank stare. He reclaims his dominance by banishing her entirely. He issues a flat 60-second countdown for her to leave before he summons the police. As the heavy doors slide shut, sealing him away, Safrafina turns into stone. She gasps for air, physically buckling from the shock. Only Marcus, stepping forward to gently grip her shoulder, keeps her upright. True heartbreak is never loud. The cruelest thing you can do to someone is to simply erase them. Complete silence will always hit harder than a scream. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? Marcus gently guides her away. She fights his grip, obsessively trying to glue together a vase she just smashed. When Marcus explicitly tells her it is over, her spirit breaks. She drags herself to a dark hotel room and stares blankly at the wall. Then the true villain makes his entrance. Her phone lights up. Adrian. This is a terrifying masterclass in emotional manipulation. He twists the knife into her wounds, whispering that Kyle is burning solely because she defied him. He crowns himself the merciful savior, promising to fix everything if she submits. Here is the tragic reality of abusers. They will set your entire life on fire, and then patiently wait outside the blazing house, just to sell you a drop of water. Adrian's messages read exactly like a predator's playbook. He softens his tone, showering her with fake, poisonous affection. He frames her total surrender as a beautiful, noble sacrifice. The camera holds on Safrafina's face, and you can visibly see her mind rewiring itself. She is slipping into Stockholm Syndrome right before our eyes. She starts believing that crawling back into his cage is the moral choice. She is prepared to trade her soul to purchase Kyle's safety. A sharp ring from Catherine shatters the dark trance, warning her about the media circus outside, but the venom is already in her veins. This is the saddest lesson of all. The iron bars of a prison only lock permanently when the captive convinces themselves that surrendering is an act of heroism. Catherine is practically screaming at her to go on the offensive. She knows striking back is the only way to survive. But Safrafina's mind is infected. She repeats the sick logic Adrian planted. She truly believes that if she fights, Kyle falls, but if she surrenders, Kyle lives. Catherine desperately calls out this insanity, reminding her that sacrificing herself forces Kyle to carry that guilt forever. That is the sinister brilliance of a narcissist. They trap you in a checkmate where every choice destroys someone you love. Safrafina curls up on the bed, convinced she is a toxic force ruining everything she touches. It is agonizing to witness. The absolute darkest phase of trauma is the terrifying moment you start believing that erasing your own existence is the only cure. Let us pause right here and take in the gravity of this moment. She cuts the phone connection, shrinking into the shadows of a lifeless room. Sleep is impossible. Her brain through catastrophic outcomes, While the ghosts of her past violently bang on the doors of her mind, she shuts her eyes. Then, at exactly 4:23 in the morning, the camera catches a tiny shift in her posture. Something inside her snaps. She refuses to kneel to her captor, and she refuses to let an innocent man bleed for her sins. She pieces together a wildly dangerous gamble. True clarity rarely arrives in the bright light of day. Life-altering decisions are forged in the quiet darkness of absolute exhaustion. Sometimes, you have to hit rock bottom to finally remember how to stand up. Let us look closely at the opening frame of this tragedy. The morning fog clings to the pavement as Serafina realizes that running is no longer an option. She stands on the edge of his corporate empire, trembling slightly in the damp chill. The camera lingers on her exhausted, hollow eyes, then cuts to the black luxury sedan pulling up at exactly 6:47. Adrian steps out. The lighting catches his pristine suit and the infuriating, flawless calm of a man who feels absolutely zero remorse for the lives he destroys. She watches his breath turn to vapor, her nerves completely frayed. It is a harsh, quiet truth to swallow. The very people who break us into pieces often sleep like infants, while we spend the darkest hours of the night falling completely apart. The camera follows her through the heavy revolving doors, pulling back to show her isolation against the towering glass and cold, sweeping marble. Every footstep echoes like a ticking clock in a mausoleum. The receptionist offers a perfectly polite, icy smile, but Serafina knows exactly how this twisted script is written. She understands his colossal ego. He views her as property, meaning he will never pass up the chance to watch her beg. She speaks her own name softly, handing over her remaining dignity like a heavy toll. It is a terrifying realization, but there is a profound lesson here. Sometimes, to break the lock on an untouchable fortress, you have to hand the tyrant exactly what he desires, playing the helpless pawn just long enough to step inside his walls. Watch the subtle shift in the room. The moment the receptionist hears her name, that professional mask slips, replaced by a messy blend of pity and morbid curiosity. Serafina is a living ghost in these halls. The steel doors of the elevator slide shut, trapping her in a gleaming metal box bound for the 48th floor. The fluorescent light above casts harsh shadows on her hollow cheeks. Staring at her shattered reflection, a tragic strategy forms in her mind. To pacify a predator, you must look exactly like bleeding prey. She lets her shoulders slump, fully embracing the image of a broken girl. We learn a painful truth in moments of survival. The greatest acts of deception demand a heavy toll, forcing you to break your own heart just to make the performance believable. Picture the staging of this dark confrontation. Floor-to-ceiling glass surrounds a barren room designed to strip away your power. The second Serafina crosses the threshold, the air grows heavy. Adrian slowly replaces his phone, turning to her with a smile completely devoid of warmth. He is a predator, sizing up a wounded bird that flew back into the cage. He casually comments on her exhausted appearance. When she pleads for him to drop the brutal legal strike against Kyle, Adrian merely tilts his head. He asks why he would ever grant such a favor, waiting patiently for her to offer her own life as the currency. It is a chilling reminder of human nature. The most dangerous manipulation does not scream or throw fists. It wears a tailored suit and waits with terrifying, quiet patience. You and I must brace ourselves here because the cruelty is suffocating. Adrian demands a full confession of her supposed betrayals. The camera drops to her trembling hands, knuckles white as she grips her coat. Crushed by his weight, she begins reciting the sins he invented for her. She begs forgiveness for ruining his trust, her shoulders shaking with quiet sobs. It is the pinnacle of a trauma bond. When she finishes tearing her soul apart, he steps close, offering a hollow, patronizing pat on her shoulder. He whispers how difficult that must have been, drinking in her total humiliation. Never forget this grim reality. The ultimate victory for a monster is not simply pushing you to the ground, but forcing you to apologize for making a sound when you finally fall. We reach the climax of her surrender. Sarafina offers to erase herself completely, promising to vanish to spare Kyle from ruin. The camera captures a flicker of genuine confusion on Adrian's face. He cannot comprehend why she would set herself on fire to keep another man warm. She fires back, her voice thick with tears, declaring that Kyle does not deserve to burn for their wreckage. Adrian turns his back, gazing down at the city skyline like a bored emperor. Without looking at her, he softly asks the fatal question. Does she love him? This reveals the tragedy of a narcissistic soul. They are completely blind to selfless devotion. If you show them raw human decency, they will only weaponize it, twisting your grace into another reason to wage war on the world. That single question strikes like a physical blow. The camera pushes in tight on Sarafina, capturing her panicked silence. For Adrian, this is just an equation of power. He paces slowly, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper as he weighs his 2 years of suffocating ownership against her fleeting weeks of freedom. He probes her mind, desperate to uncover what this rival possesses that he lacks. Inside, she is screaming the answer. Kyle never locked her in a gilded cage and called it romance. Yet, the deep roots of her trauma keep her frozen in place. It is one of the heaviest burdens we carry in this life. Sometimes we swallow our words not because we are unsure of the truth, but because speaking it aloud will cost us absolutely everything we have left. Let us examine this brutal chessboard together. Sarafina knows she dragged an innocent man into a nightmare. When she whispers that Kyle simply made her feel safe, a twitch betrays Adrian's wounded pride. He insists his surveillance was the ultimate protection. She reminds him that real devotion does not require a tracking device. But Adrian is a master of psychological warfare. With a cold smirk, he flips the script, weaponizing her evasions to ask what true deception looks like. It is a surgical strike at her deepest guilt. The light fades from her eyes, and she drops her sword to shield the bystander. We all stumble, but a true manipulator will collect your failures like rusted coins, holding them ready to spend the exact moment you try to reclaim your freedom. Notice how he uses the room to break her spirit. Adrian lifts a thick 27-page legal document and lets it drop onto the glass desk with a heavy thud. It is a loaded weapon aimed squarely at Kyle's future. When she begs him to call off the hounds, the trap snaps shut. He leans closer, demanding she step back into her cage so he can prove his twisted obsession is actual romance. He is equating a hostage negotiation with a love story. Her voice trembles as she calls him completely insane, a perfectly accurate diagnosis. Yet, the cruelest joke in this tragic world is that seeing the madness clearly does not save you. Knowing exactly how broken a monster is will never be enough to protect you from the devastating wounds they can still inflict. The psychological lens violently distorts. Adrian smoothly paints himself as the tragic hero. He coldly reminds her that Kyle already walked away, positioning himself as the only sanctuary she has left. It is a masterful isolation tactic. As Sarafina backs toward the heavy door, his voice drops to a dead, mechanical cadence. He lists exactly how he will obliterate a 15-year career, ensuring she understands the blood will stain her hands. He sells her captivity as a noble sacrifice. We witness this tragedy often. The villain convinces you that you are entirely responsible for the raging fire they just started. The most bitter lesson to accept is that you simply cannot save everyone, especially when the deck was completely rigged before you even sat down to play. The camera closes in on these agonizing final moments. Adrian dangles a sliver of fake freedom, promising to dial back the surveillance. When she whispers that she does not trust him, he summons the shadow of his attack dogs, the legal team designed to butcher men like Kyle. You can see Serafina's body shutting down. Her vision blurs as she fights for oxygen. Staring into his calm, dead eyes, the reality solidifies. He will slaughter an innocent life without a blink. Her final ounce of resistance shatters into ash. Defeated, she quietly asks how long she must serve this prison sentence. It breaks the heart to watch, teaching us a devastating truth. Sometimes, the brave choice a person can make, braves their sword, is throwing down theirs to spare the innocent from a hopeless crossfire. Listen closely to the final nail being driven into the coffin. Adrian commands her to stay until she remembers why she loved him, completely blurring the line between a partner and a captive. And if the brainwashing fails, he casually murmurs, "They will figure it out later." He never intends to unlock the door. She stares at this monster who built a prison out of affection. Sickened that he believes his own dark fairy tale, she buys a pathetic 24-hour head start. Stumbling out into the freezing morning wind, her adrenaline finally runs dry. She collapses onto a frosted city bench, shaking violently as she buries her face in her hands. Here is the bitter truth we must carry forward. There are agonizing days in this life where simply surviving looks exactly like total, absolute defeat. The camera pushes in slowly on Serafina, capturing the stark shadows cutting across her pale, exhausted face. We are witnessing a soul trapped in an impossible corner. She must either let her own fragile mind be torn to shreds, or watch an innocent man take the fall for her past. Then, the sharp ring of her phone shatters the quiet. It is Catherine Mercer, and her voice holds no warmth, only cold steel. Catherine delivers a devastating truth. You do not negotiate with a toxic manipulator. They only use your desperate words to reload their weapon. When Serafina tearfully confesses the extortion, the line falls dead quiet. Catherine refuses to let her play the helpless victim. The lesson here is simple. You cannot hide from the monsters in your life. You have to drag them out into the daylight. Notice how the lighting shifts, growing colder as we watch this brutal fight for her actual soul. Stockholm Syndrome whispers venom in Serafina's ear, begging her to take the bullets just to keep Duval safe. But Catherine methodically strips away that toxic martyr complex, peeling it back piece by bleeding piece. She hits Serafina with a heavy reality check. Duval is a grown man who knew the risks. Treating him like a helpless child is a massive insult to his courage. Sometimes, the hardest lesson we ever learn is this. Truly trusting someone means letting them carry the weight of their own brave choices, even when it absolutely terrifies you. Catherine pokes right at Serafina's lingering pride, asking if she is truly that weak. The papers are signed. She just has to pick up the sword. The mental dam finally shatters, breaking the scene into a rapid, gut-wrenching montage. We see quiet, warm flashes of her feeling perfectly safe with Duval, violently crashing into the ugly truth of her own tangled lies. Her shoulders physically drop as she faces a bitter, inescapable fact. Duval does not owe her a single ounce of forgiveness. But the human will to survive is a stubborn, beautiful thing. She owes it to herself to die standing on her feet, not begging on her knees. She gives the green light, her voice barely a whisper. 3 hours later, the bomb goes off. The private case file hits the internet, exposing the digital stalking and the horror stories of past victims. The lesson is undeniable. The truth always finds a way out, ripping open the darkest doors. Let's look at this piece by piece, shall we? The fallout plays out in absolute systematic chaos. Wealthy executives scramble to distance themselves from the messy scandal, while media sharks smell fresh blood in the water. Catherine coldly reads off the damage report, but the camera lingers on Sarafina's trembling hands. She is entirely stuck on one single detail. She practically begs to know how Duval reacted, desperate to measure the depth of his hatred, and Catherine delivers a line that rips the heart right out of the frame. Duval does not hate her. He hates the fact that he still cares about her. It teaches us a brutal life lesson. Trauma never just burns the victim. It scorches everyone standing nearby. Meanwhile, by 6 p.m., Adrian is staging a perfectly fake press event. Stick with me here, because you and I need to watch this perfectly sick performance together. Adrian approaches the flashing cameras acting like a wounded, tragic hero who only wanted to help. The lighting catches his teary eyes as he takes his own massive cruelty and attempts to sell it as deep, protective love for a broken woman. When reporters press him about the other victims, he pulls the oldest, darkest trick in the playbook. He smoothly denies their reality. He offers an incredibly hollow apology, stating he is sorry they misunderstood his kindness. It is a terrifying magic trick. The lesson is chilling but necessary. Some people feel absolutely nothing for the lives they ruin, forever trapped in a cold, lonely cage of their own flawless illusions. Focus on the deep contrast in this sequence. We see Adrian up there at the microphone, lying through his teeth with an eerie, calm smile. Cut to Sarafina, watching him on a glowing screen, a dark room. You can literally see the color drain from her cheeks, her breathing turning shallow as her body enters full panic mode. Then her phone vibrates. It is Kyle. She answers, her fingers shaking like autumn leaves. His voice on the other end is totally dead, ice cold. He demands to know why she dropped a legal bomb without warning him first. She thought she was being brave. But life teaches us a hard truth here. Good intentions do not fix broken systems. She just took their private nightmare and threw it to the wolves, making a bad situation 1,000 times more dangerous. It is physically painful to watch this scene unfold. Sarafina genuinely believes she has to throw herself on the train tracks to save the very man trying to rescue her. Tears of pure exhaustion stream down her face as she tells Kyle she only wanted to keep him safe. But Kyle completely rejects this tragic savior game. The camera captures his hardened jaw as he lays out the grim reality of what comes next. Adrian has expensive, ruthless lawyers ready to tear her mind apart in front of the world. They will paint her as a crazy, bitter ex out for money. Here is the brutal lesson we all must swallow in the unforgiving court of public opinion. The actual truth rarely matters. A skilled abuser will simply flip the script, leaving the victim looking like the villain. Notice how the shadows close in around her. This is exactly how a mastermind breaks you down until you cannot even pull a breath into your lungs. Sarafina is sobbing openly, begging to know what else she could have possibly done. She confesses, her voice cracking, that she actually offered to go right back to Adrian just to make the nightmare stop for everyone else. It is a devastating image, the broken bird begging to return to her cage. Kyle hears this, and his voice drops to a scary, dead whisper. He tells her he already knows. He refuses to let her play the willing sacrifice. She is choking on her own tears, apologizing over and over. He cuts her off sharply. The lesson here is survival. You cannot cry your way out of a war. You have to stand up and fight back. Step back and admire the twisted architecture of Adrian's trap. He is masterfully painting Sarafina as the evil mastermind and Kyle as the foolish pawn. Kyle knows they only have one desperate shot left. If they do not move as a unified front, they will both lose everything. He is completely drained, a soldier tired of fighting shadows. So he draws a harsh line in the sand. No more half-truths, no more hiding behind gentle lies to spare his feelings. He demands the entire ugly reality. Sarafina closes her swollen eyes, looking totally defeated. Then, Kyle asks the one question that shatters the room. Did she ever actually love Adrian? She wants to lie to save her dignity. But the lesson is absolute. True healing demands brutal honesty, so she breaks down and whispers yes. The camera stays tight on her face as she tries to untangle the mess. She desperately explains that the love was only real before he morphed into a total monster. She admits her romance with Marcus Chen was never genuine love, just a blind, panicked attempt to run away. But when Kyle asks where he fits into her fractured heart, the silence in the room becomes deafening. She freezes, honestly admitting her brain is too broken to even recognize love right now. Kyle takes that massive hit without a single blink. He delivers the cold facts. Adrian just won the crowd with fake tears. Their only remaining weapon is absolute, unprotected honesty. The lesson here is terrifying but true. Sometimes the only way to beat a lie is to expose every single one of your own painful mistakes. The tension builds as they set their own trap for the very next afternoon. It will be a live press conference. She, Kyle, and Catherine will stand under harsh lights, showing their deepest, ugliest scars to millions of strangers. Sarafina sits motionless in a dim room, fully convinced she is going to crack under the massive weight of it all. But Kyle delivers the coldest wake-up call imaginable. If she hides in the shadows now, Adrian gets to write the script of her life forever. The line goes dead. She is left staring at her own fractured reflection in the glass. The life lesson here is profound. You must own your story, or someone else will weaponize it against you. By early afternoon, she steps into a plain hotel lobby, wearing a simple suit like a modern set of armor. The camera follows them down a sterile corridor. Catherine stops her right outside the doors, looking deep into her eyes, searching for any crack in her resolve. Sarafina does not attempt to hide her trembling hands. She admits she is completely terrified. Catherine gives a slow, heavy nod, reminding her that fear is the only sane reaction to the fire she's about to walk into. They push open the heavy wooden doors. Kyle is already waiting by the window, bathed in cold daylight, looking like a man preparing for a street fight. They exchange a long, silent stare, recognizing the profound damage they share. He steps close, his eyes incredibly heavy. The lesson is quiet, but vital. True courage is not the absence of fear, but choosing to walk right into the roaring flames anyway. For one fleeting, cinematic second, the rigid lines of Kyle's face actually soften. He does not completely forgive her betrayal, but you can see in his eyes that he finally understands the sheer depth of her pain. Then, the heavy double doors swing open. A massive, hungry wave of reporters pushes forward. Camera flashes violently, lighting up the stark room. Catherine strides up to the microphones first, immediately setting the absolute ground rules. She warns the eager crowd that this is not a court of law, but three battered people revealing the truth of a toxic nightmare. Kyle then takes the podium. He radiates raw, unbending power, silencing the entire room instantly. The lesson here is commanding. When you finally stop hiding your scars, you strip the monster of its remaining power. The camera lingers on Kyle at the podium, breaking down the timeline like a machine. Under the blinding flashbulbs, he details how, 3 weeks ago, he realized a stalker was hunting his people. He cornered the puppet master, looked Adrian straight in the eye, and ripped his secret into the harsh light. Kyle does not blink. His voice is an unyielding anchor. He has zero regrets about destroying a bully. But then the armor cracks. He confesses his fatal error. He was blind to their venomous history. Sometimes, rushing in to play the savior only makes the blood spill faster. He steps back into the shadows. Serafina steps into the light, trembling, as 100 cameras lock onto her pale face. The truest life lesson is that every savior eventually meets a tragedy they cannot fix. Let us pause right here and really study this frame. Serafina's knuckles are bone white, her fingers digging into the heavy wood of the podium to anchor her shattered reality. She drags the last 2 years with Adrian into the brutal light, the tracking, the suffocating isolation, the slow erosion of her sanity. But then, the tragic victim facade shatters. She stares directly into the lenses and confesses that she cheated. She lied first. It is a suffocating irony. She handed Adrian a single spark, and he used it to burn their world to ash. The simple truth you have to remember in life is this: yet your own mistakes never give another human being the right to utterly destroy you. But standing in the light and owning those sins, that takes a staggering kind of bravery. This is where the narrative fractures. We are watching two broken souls who absolutely ruined one another. Serafina is not begging for a halo. She owns every step of their toxic dance, but she draws a heavy line in the sand. Yes, she lied, but Adrian mutating into a digital phantom, hunting her every move, that is a crime. She refuses the martyr role and turns her fragile frame toward Kyle. Her apology to him is so stripped of defense, so agonizingly raw, it feels like a physical blow. She dragged an innocent man into her private hell. The reporters smell blood, shouting over one another, but she just stands firm in the chaos. The lesson here is undeniable. Facing the absolute worst of yourself without any armor is the only true way out of the dark. Catherine cuts through the room like a shark, snapping the circus shut. Kyle does not waste a heartbeat. He seizes Serafina, and they vanish out a side door before the mob can tear them apart. Picture them in a dimly lit hotel suite just above the frenzy. The silence is suffocating. Catherine paces, watching the digital world erupt. Serafina just tossed a live grenade into Adrian's pristine image. Kyle dismisses Catherine into the hall. Left alone, he stares through the cold window at the blurred city lights. He turns to Serafina, his chest still heaving with adrenaline, and admits he cannot tell if she is profoundly brave or entirely foolish. A stark life lesson emerges here. True courage almost always looks exactly like sheer stupidity to everyone standing safely on the sidelines. The tension in the suite shifts into something fragile. Healing only begins the exact second the lying stops. Serafina absorbs his heavy judgment and softly asks what comes next. But Kyle's voice drops an octave. They wait, but he vows that if Adrian tries to twist narrative, he will unleash total war. The shadows play across her face, masking her profound confusion. Why would a man gamble his entire empire for a shattered woman? Kyle steps into her space, closing the physical gap. He looks deeply into her eyes and says he sees someone bleeding out just to tell the truth. Her voice breaks as she whispers that she does not deserve to be saved. Kyle offers her absolute grace anyway. Sometimes the most powerful life lesson you can learn is finding the quiet strength to simply allow yourself to be forgiven. You and I need to pause the film right here. This is the exact frame where Kyle's universe shatters. His phone vibrates. It is his head of security. Watch the blood completely vanish from Kyle's face. He speaks only 3 clipped phrases. When, how bad, lock it down. He ends the call, and the dark shift in his posture makes Serafina's stomach violently drop. Kyle slowly looks at her, his eyes resembling dead winter ice. Someone just firebombed his flagship restaurant. His loyal people are bleeding. The flames are still climbing. He does not even need to speak the name. They both know Adrian just escalated this from a PR war to pure physical terror. The chilling life lesson here is that a true narcissist will gladly burn down the entire world before they ever accept defeat. They pull up to the police barricades 23 minutes later. The visual is an absolute Greek tragedy. Thick, suffocating columns of black smoke bleed from the second-floor windows. 15 years of Kyle's identity, his blood and sweat, are turning to grey ash under the flashing sirens. But look closely at his face. He completely dissociates, retreating into a cold, untouchable fortress within his mind. An exhausted fire chief approaches, wiping toxic soot from his brow, confirming it was a rapid chemical blaze. Kyle asks for the casualty count in a hollow, metallic monotone. 2 servers, 1 cook, severe burns. The life lesson hidden in these ashes is brutally dark when the innocent people you lead are forced to bleed in your private war. The sheer weight of that guilt will eat you alive. The chief reveals the arsonist slipped away a mere 60 seconds before the detonation. Watch the jagged flex of Kyle's jaw in the dim light. It is the only physical crack betraying the murderous rage boiling beneath his skin. The attacker moved with the cold precision of a ghost. This was a paid mercenary. Kyle offers the chief one hollow nod and pivots away. Serafina watches his silhouette, physically trembling. Her twisted trauma bond with Adrian tells her exactly what kind of hell comes next. They slide back into the car, and the heavy silence becomes a chokehold. Kyle grips the steering wheel until his knuckles turn bone white. The hard life lesson here is written in stone. You can never negotiate peace with a monster who finds genuine joy in watching you bleed. Observing a fractured man standing on the edge of a psychological cliff, knowing they are prey, Kyle abandons his main estate and drives deep into the woods to a hidden property in Connecticut. Past midnight, he kills the engine. He sits in the pitch-black car, paralyzed by the shadows. Serafina shatters the quiet. She begins to weep, crushed by the thought that 3 innocent souls are in a hospital because of her existence. It is pure survivor's guilt. But those words snap Kyle out of his trance. He fiercely rejects her confession. Turning to face her in the gloom, his voice is iron. Adrian alone struck that match. The lesson is vital for anyone carrying invisible scars. Never absorb the blame for the violent, cruel choices another human being willingly makes. Kyle's dismantling of her guilt is a tragic masterclass in breaking a trauma loop. He cuts through her tears. Gadine. She did not pour the gasoline. She did not pay a mercenary to reduce his legacy to ash. Adrian committed this atrocity, and Adrian will pay. Desperate, Serafina begs to know his plan, but Kyle erects a wall of ice. He drifts into the shadowy house, pours a heavy measure of dark liquor, and stands by the counter, a statue lost in thought. He drinks in absolute silence. Standing helpless in the doorway, she watches him fade. He orders her to sleep. His voice so thick with exhaustion it feels like a physical wound. He must construct his war alone. Life holds a bitter irony. Sometimes, the people trying the hardest to protect us are the exact ones pushing us the furthest away. Let us step into the bleak aftermath. Serafina finally surrenders to nervous exhaustion. When she wakes to the cold grey bleed of morning light and the scent of dark coffee, she finds Kyle frozen in the exact same spot. He has not shed his ruined suit or slept a single second. When she softly questions him, his response is completely hollow. Then, he drops a confession that reframes his entire existence. He spent the night agonizing over his dead sister, Elena, a phantom he never speaks of. Staring into his mug, he whispers she was 2 years younger, radiating a light he never bothered to praise while she was still breathing. The most devastating life lesson you will ever learn is this: showering someone with appreciation only after they are gone will never bring them back. The camera pushes in as Kyle unlocks the rusted vault of his childhood. His father was a monster who weaponized love. He was a psychological butcher, breaking your mind while convincing you he was your only shield. Kyle locks eyes with Serafina, asking if that script sounds familiar. The dark parallel to Adrian is chilling. By 17, his sister Elena was a hollow ghost wandering her own home. Kyle confesses his most agonizing failure. He was so consumed with surviving their father's wrath that he never noticed his little sister dying internally. She overdosed at 19 in what they conveniently called an accident. The darkest life lesson is terrifyingly real. True monsters do not hide under the bed. They sit right at the dinner table and convince you they are family. Serafina reaches out to soothe him, but Kyle deflects her touch like a fighter, blocking a blow. He claims he has had 2 decades to process the grief, but the guilt is clearly eating him alive. He looks right through her and confesses his unforgivable sin. He escaped that venomous house and left his little sister behind in the dark. He fed himself the lie that she was tough enough to survive the beast alone. Serafina pleads that he was only a child, but he violently rejects the excuse. He knew abandoning her was a death sentence, and he left anyway. His voice cracks as the terrifying realization hits him. He almost abandoned Serafina to the exact same fate. The final life lesson is undeniable. If you refuse to face the demons of your past, you are doomed to inflict them on the people you love. Let us hold on this frame for a second. The lighting here is stark, cutting across Kyle's face as he systematically tears himself apart. His shoulders are caved, hands trembling. "I chose my own survival over yours," he confesses, his voice cracking like dry wood. It hits Serafina like a physical blow, but she refuses to let the camera linger on his guilt. She steps into his space, the distance between them vanishing. She reminds him that both she and his sister were just lying to survive a world that gave them zero control. "Your sister made her own tragic choice," she whispers, "but you did not make it for her. It is a brutal, beautiful truth. We simply cannot carry the heavy weight of the fatal choices that belonged to someone else." She takes that same logic and throws it right at their current nightmare. The room is dead quiet. "Adrian choosing to burn down your life is not on my shoulders," she tells him. "We cannot micromanage the destructive impulses of broken people." Kyle grips the marble counter so hard his knuckles drain of blood. "Then what can we actually control?" he demands. Serafina gives him a masterclass in resilience right then and there. "We only control how we respond," she says, "and whether we let their shattered minds break our own." There is a heavy, suffocating silence. When Kyle Landley speaks, his tone is terrifyingly flat. "I am going to destroy him." He vows to wipe out Adrian entirely. The lesson is dark but true. The only way to truly protect your hard-earned peace is to go to absolute war. You and I need to look closely at this exact frame because we are watching the total death of Kyle's restraint. Serafina feels the temperature in the room turn to ice. She warns him that attacking now will just look like bitter revenge. But Kyle is gone. Adrian burned his sanctuary, and that is a permanent line. Kyle's eyes hold a dead, lethal focus that chills the blood. He admits he was playing defense, but those rules are officially dead. He grabs his phone, demanding every piece of dirt on Adrian. The money, the emails, the surveillance files. He verbally accepts all the legal risks without blinking. The hunt is on. The lesson here is terrifying. Push a patient man too far, and you will eventually beg for the regulated version of him you used to hate. He drops the phone on the counter and turns to her. The shadows in the room seem to lengthen as he issues a direct order. Pack up and go stay with Catherine. He desperately wants to build a wall between her and the moral rot he is about to step into. I am about to do some very unethical things, he warns. But Serafina just plants her feet into the floorboards. She refuses to run, calling out his massive hypocrisy right to his face. You just agonized over abandoning people, and now you want me to abandon you? Not happening. He tries to say, this is not her fight. She fires back. She went to the press and broke his lies. She is not hiding now. The lesson is undeniable. You cannot shield someone from a chaotic storm they willingly helped you summon. You just have to stand in the rain together. The camera tightens on Kyle's face, and you can literally see his mental walls collapsing. He gives her one last, brutally honest warning. If you stay, you will see my absolute baseline, he says, his voice thick with dread. The parts that are neither safe nor polite. Serafina tells him his darkness does not scare her. Maybe it should, he mutters. Her response holds the pure exhaustion of a lifelong victim. I have been terrified my whole life, she breathes out, and I am done running. Kyle gives a single nod, accepting their mutual descent into the mud. What happens next is 48 hours of pure surgical destruction. The simple truth here, real loyalty is not standing by someone when they are perfect. It is holding their hand when they show you the darkest parts of their soul. The trap finally snaps shut. Agents swarm Adrian's headquarters under harsh fluorescent lights. You and I are watching the monitor alongside them, seeing this arrogant narcissist completely fall apart. Adrian is dragged out in handcuffs, looking small and broken. The terrifying predator is now just a powerless guy. But look closely at Serafina. There is no cheering, just massive, soul-crushing exhaustion settling into her bones. Kyle stares blankly at the screen. The takedown is entirely complete, yet he delivers the bitterest line of the film. I just spent 3 weeks turning into the exact ruthless monster I swore I would never be. The lesson here is incredibly steep. When you go to war against a toxic force, you have to be very careful not to grow your own claws in the process. Let us pause and look at the real toll of revenge. The lighting is dim, matching the heavy mood. Serafina stares at Kyle, the man who burned down the world to protect her, and asks a terrifying question. Did you enjoy destroying him? Kyle looks back. His silence is the darkest answer possible. This is not a triumphant victory. It is raw survival, and the main casualties are their own moral boundaries. A week later, Catherine calls with a plea deal. Adrian will take 5 to 7 years in prison and drop his fake lawsuits. Serafina sits on the edge of the unmade bed, letting the cold reality sink into her skin. The life lesson here is tough to swallow. Sometimes true survival does not mean a perfect, clean, happy ending. It just means putting the weapon down and accepting a fractured, messy peace. We need to unpack the stark difference between winning in court and actually moving on. Serafina asks about the stalking charges, her voice tight. The lawyer is brutally practical. Going to trial would waste millions of dollars and drain years of her life. Then comes the ultimate question. Do you want justice, revenge, or closure? Justice happens in a cold, sterile courtroom. Revenge is wanting the monster to bleed out on the floor. But closure is the quiet, difficult act of simply walking away. The life as lesson is staring us right in the face. You simply cannot heal if you refuse to let go of the blade that cut you. Sarafina pictures Adrian in a federal cell, absolutely convinced that he is the real victim. Let him stay trapped in that pathetic delusion forever. Sarafina finally admits what is really breaking her heart in this scene. Her voice trembles. She desperately wants the narcissist to feel real remorse. It is the classic tragic trap of a trauma bond, hoping the monster will magically grow a conscience. But Catherine drops a heavy truth. A judge cannot legally force someone to feel empathy. Whether Adrian ever realizes how broken he is, that is his problem now. The second she accepts that fact, you can almost hear the heavy chains break. She approves the plea deal. Her nervous system finally starts to power down. The life lesson here is vital. True peace begins the moment you stop waiting for an apology from a person incapable of giving one. She walks into the kitchen and finds Kyle cooking. Just grounded, normal human care. Look closely at how the energy shifts between them now. She whispers that the deal is officially done. Kyle just keeps chopping garlic. His hands are completely steady, anchoring the turbulent room. He asks if she is okay with the result, ensuring she knows this choice was entirely hers. Yeshti reminds him that he spent weeks ruining his own soul to protect her, not to fuel a personal revenge tour. Kyle looks up. His eyes are free of the toxic control she expects from men. Her peace of mind is the only trophy he cares about. She leans against the counter, admitting she is unbelievably tired of the war. The lesson here is profound. Healing is rarely a triumphant shout from a mountaintop. Usually, it is just the exhausted, quiet sigh of a battered soldier taking off their heavy armor. So, what happens when the villain is finally gone? You have to figure out how to be normal again. Kyle admits he has no clue how to do that, but he is willing to learn. They sit at the table, awkwardly acting like regular humans. It is a fragile comfort, like building a house of cards next to a bomb crater. You and I see this all the time with severe trauma. Your brain rejects sudden peace because it feels like a trap. Later, they sit on opposite ends of the couch with a huge, careful gap between them. Finally, Sarafina breaks the silence. She asks the question that has been haunting her. Why did he step in? The life lesson is strangely profound. Sometimes, learning how to exist in a quiet room is much harder than surviving a violent war. Kyle swirls the wine in his glass, completely calm. The soft lighting catches the deep sorrow in his eyes. He tells her she reminded him of his sister. Not how she looked, but how she moved. He recognized that tragic posture of someone who has been abused, making themselves physically tiny just to survive. But you and I must appreciate the crucial pivot here. He did not stick around because she was a helpless victim. He stayed because she was fiercely fighting back. Sarafina tries to brush it off, saying his money saved her. He shuts that down instantly. Resources are useless if you do not have a spine. Here is your life lesson. True strength is clawing your own way out of the wreckage. Someone else might hold a flashlight, but you have to do the climbing. Let us step into this frame together, shall we? Watch the subtle shift in the lighting as Kyle does the unthinkable in their twisted, tragic world. He offers Sarafina a perfectly blank slate. His hands remain steady, palms open, a quiet promise of no expectations. If they only ever exist as friends, he murmurs, that is enough. The tension in her fragile shoulders finally collapses. Real love never presses a barrel to your temple to demand an answer. 3 months cut forward in a breath. The camera tracks her through a tiny, quiet apartment in Brooklyn. No Adrian. No psychological warfare. Across the river, Kyle silently lays fresh bricks over the ashes of his restaurant. The lesson here is as undeniable as gravity. You simply cannot heal in the exact same room that broke you. The rhythm of their days settles into muted, peaceful tones. Coffee on Wednesday mornings, quiet dinners on Sundays, a perfectly safe sanctuary. But fate is a cruel director. On a bone-chilling Tuesday, the camera focuses on an envelope stamped from the state penitentiary. Her breath catches. Adrian. The paper trembles violently in her hands as she reads his shattered confession, locked away with the violent men he once laughed at. His colossal ego has cracked wide open. A psychiatrist has diagnosed his narcissism, holding a mirror up to the monster beneath his polished skin. It is the absolute ruin of his carefully constructed illusion. We learn a heavy truth from this tragedy. The most agonizing prison is never made of iron bars. It is the inescapable horror of finally seeing yourself for exactly who you are. The camera pushes in tight on the ink of that trembling page. Adrian lays out a staggering confession. He admits, in beautiful, tragic prose, that he blurred the line between protecting a lover and keeping a prisoner. He confesses to sabotaging her spirit while playing the savior. Sarafina sits by the frosted window, reading the cursive 3 agonizing times. The scene is cold, matching the chilling sincerity of his words. But here is the tragedy of a caged narcissist. They always write like tormented poets. The words bleed beautifully on paper, yet a few therapy sessions cannot wash away a lifetime of venom. This is just calculated data disguised as regret. The lesson is vital to our survival. Never mistake a beautifully written, tear-jerking apology for the heavy, silent work of actual behavior change. The camera pushes in as she folds the paper with brutal finality, sliding it into a dark drawer. She is not writing back. In the scope of this tragedy, this quiet moment is a monumental victory. His sudden epiphany does not magically erase her scars. On Sunday evening, the warm diner light catches the letter as she slides it to Kyle. His jaw tightens, but his voice is soft when he asks where her heart is at. She is fracturing, desperate to believe his remorse, yet terrified it is an illusion. Kyle's response strikes like a hammer. He tells her both realities exist at once. The man who broke you can weep with genuine sorrow and still be the very monster who destroys you tomorrow. A broken heart does not mean a fixed soul. The lesson here: feeling sick about your sins is entirely different from having the spine to change them. Sarafina absorbs the weight of his words, shadows clinging to her face. Then comes the agonizing question every survivor whispers into the dark: will he actually change? Kyle just calmly replies that the man might try, but that battle is no longer hers to watch. We all have to remember this harsh, beautiful truth. You are never assigned to be the eternal parole officer for the phantom who ruined you. Your only obligation is dragging yourself out of the wreckage. Outside, snow begins to drift over the city. Sarafina's eyes finally detach from her ghosts and lock onto the scarred, steady man across the booth. She tells him she is ready to figure them out. Kyle visibly braces, as if preparing for a physical blow. The lesson resonates deeply here. You stop owing your tragic past a single breath the moment you boldly claim your own future. She looks into the eyes of the man who became her anchor, delivering the most devastatingly beautiful line of her life. She tells him she does not actually need him to survive anymore. With the suffocating desperation gone, Choosing to stay is an act of pure free will, not a frantic grab for a life raft. The stoic mask Kyle wears for the world completely shatters, exposing a raw, terrified hope underneath. He barely breathes as he asks if she is truly making that choice. Her hand reaches across the worn table, gripping his, a definitive, world-altering yes. The winter begins to thaw. She spins her darkest trauma into armor, standing tall to defend her thesis. They do not rush the next chapter. True freedom, we learn, is laying the bricks of your life with infinite patience, ensuring your new foundation can finally bear the weight of your happiness. Let us move forward through the timeline. The camera glides alongside them on a crisp afternoon in Central Park, but a tragedy always demands an encore. Her phone vibrates. The monster is securing early parole. Sarafina freezes, the color draining from her cheeks. Kyle's posture shifts instantly. The dormant predator in his blood wakes up, his jaw setting like granite. He leans in, voice dangerously low, offering to permanently erase the problem. But she cuts him off with absolute ice. No, he served his time. Kyle bristles with protective rage, demanding to know what happens if the shadow returns. Her answer is cinematic perfection. She will simply make a call and let the concrete cage swallow him again. She is done running. The psychological war ends the exact second you look your deepest fear in the eye and absolutely refuse to play the helpless prey. I want us to truly pause and examine the framing of this moment. Months of agonizing psychological labor have entirely rewired her soul. She looks up at Kyle, a ruthless man who should logically terrify her, and feels absolutely no fear. Kyle, a man who built an empire on total control, stares back and sees a woman who finally bows to no one. He murmurs how profoundly proud he is. She is no longer shrinking into the shadows or begging him to be her violent shield. A tear escapes as she whispers that she owes him her very life. He rejects it instantly, placing the crown firmly back on her head. He swears she would have clawed her way to the surface with or without him. It is a stunning display of grace. The ultimate lesson is that true recovery is never about finding a terrifying guardian to save you. It is unearthing the brutal strength to save yourself, the heavy cinematic weight pulling at this scene. This man dismantled a violent criminal underworld just to watch her breathe, yet he managed to love her without locking the cage. When she finally confesses her love, he goes completely still, reminding her she does not owe him her heart. But Sarafina smiles through the shadows. She recognizes the massive canyon between deeply loving a man and desperately needing him to survive the night. It is the glorious antithesis of her trauma. He pulls her in, the kiss deliberate and slow, a treaty between equals. The reel jumps forward exactly 1 year. It is midnight, and she stands bathed in moonlight in his high-rise kitchen. The moral is written in the stars. A love forged from a calm, conscious choice will always outlast a desperate affection born from simply trying to stay alive. Notice the deliberate staging of this shot. She is not on her knees scrubbing the stone tiles in a panic. She is just pouring tea. The sensory details remain identical to her nightmare, the sharp scent of lemon cleaner, the freezing touch of marble, the grid of the city 40 floors below. But the world inside her head is completely transformed. Kyle drifts into the frame, drained from the day, and loosely drapes his arm across her shoulders. She whispers that sleep evaded her. He presses a soft kiss to her hair. It is a portrait of ordinary, breathtaking peace. They stand in the exact kitchen where her spirit was once violently broken. The contrast aches beautifully. The truest measure of human resilience is not merely running from the dark. It is having the courage to stand in the room that once terrified you and finally feeling completely at home. This is the ground zero, where the tragedy first bled into her life. Kyle leans against her and murmurs, "No more ghosts in this house." With that single vow, she locks the iron gates against the demons of her past. Outside the glass, millions in Manhattan are drowning in their own chaotic lives. But stick with me here. Let us just watch these two bathed in the warm amber light of the kitchen. They crawled through the inferno and came out the other side. They both know the trauma is not magically erased. The scars are raised and permanent. Yet they walk into the dawn armed with an unstoppable force, the profound agency to choose their own fate. The great truth of this life is deeply poetic. You can never scrub away a brutal history, but you earn the absolute power to decide exactly who stands beside you when the smoke finally clears. It is the exquisite release of discovering that the illusion of safety has hardened into concrete reality. The camera lingers as she gently sets her cup in the sink, letting Kyle lead her down the quiet hallway. We are given one final, chilling cutaway. Deep inside a federal penitentiary, Adrian stares blankly at a rotting ceiling. His diseased mind will never comprehend how two people can love without holding a knife to each other's throats. But the lens stops caring about him. This triumph belongs solely to Sarafina. She achieved the impossible. She chose her own soul first, and then allowed in a partner who offered that exact same reverence. The curtain falls on this vital, lasting truth. We do not need a lover to magically stitch our deepest flaws back together. We only need someone who examines our jagged, broken pieces and fiercely decides they want to stay. Cale Duval offers Sarafina protection, and in many ways his help becomes essential. He updates security protocols, investigates Adrian, confronts him, and uses his influence to create consequences. However, the story also raises an important educational question. Where is the line between protection and control? Cale is powerful, decisive, and used to giving orders. He tells Sarafina not to leave the building, but instructs others to watch, and makes choices quickly when he believes she is in danger. And his intentions may be protective, but Sarafina's past makes this complicated. She has already lived under a man who claimed to be protecting her while actually limiting her freedom. That is why this story teaches a mature lesson. Safety matters, but personal agency matters too. Helping someone should not mean taking over their life. True protection should create space for this person to breathe, choose, and rebuild, not simply move them from one person's control to another S. Cale is different from Adrian because he recognizes harm and acts against it, but he still must learn that care cannot be based only on authority. Sarafina is not a possession, a household asset, or a problem to be managed. She is a person with fear, history, mistakes, and the right to participate in decisions about her own safety. For educational purposes, this lesson is very important in relationships, families, workplaces, and crisis situations. People who want to help must ask themselves, am I empowering this person, or am I controlling them because I am afraid? Sarafina's story reminds us that real safety is not only the absence of danger. Real safety includes respect, informed choice, emotional honesty, and the freedom to say no. Protection becomes healthy only when it preserves the dignity of the person being protected.